Chapter 688. While I was excited, Tong Tong wasn't happy to hear my words. She waved the heavenly lightning chain in her hand to clear the ghosts around. She pouted and said to me, "No, I'm going to find Brother Fatty alone. If the little snake goes with me, who will protect you?" Tong Tong had always been obedient, but now she was in a bad mood. I was anxious and didn't care about my pleasant expression. My face darkened, and I ordered her, "Tong Tong, listen to me. Brother can deal with it alone. Look, the jade bracelet has the true dragon chi that can restore my true essence. I always carry a lot of talismans with me, so it won't be a problem for me to go alone. I'll meet up with you soon." Normally, Tong Tong would definitely accept such a tone from me. But this time, since it was related to my safety, Tong Tong didn't give in. She lifted her head and looked at me. After a moment of silence, she said, "No, brother, if you want to do this, let the little snake go. I'll stay here." At this moment, I was really angry. I took a deep breath and said, "Tong Tong, now isn't the time to make trouble. Listen to me and take the little snake with you." This time, Tong Tong didn't say anything. She turned her head and focused on dealing with the ghosts behind her. Her attitude was clear. She insisted on leaving one person with me. If we delayed here, the fatty side would be in more danger. I nodded helplessly and accepted her suggestion. I let her go while the snake spirit stayed with me. Although the snake spirit's cultivation was slightly higher than Tong Tong's, the heavenly lightning power could restrain the ghost better. However, the power of the heavenly lightning in the pupil's eyes was the bane of these spirits. Also, compared to the unreliable spirit snake, I felt more at ease with the pupil. After getting my approval, Tong Tong revealed a smile. She put away the heavenly lightning chain in her hand and turned to the snake spirit, who was crazily swallowing the ghosts. "Little snake, I'll leave this place to you. Do you hear me? Don't just eat. If you don't protect me, I won't let you go when I come back. Do you understand?" I didn't know whether to laugh or cry after hearing Tong Tong's words. In my eyes, these two fellows were like my younger siblings or children. I always thought about how to protect them and when I needed them. However, Tong Tong was still in a bad mood, so I didn't say anything. As for the snake spirit, its fear of Tong, great demon king, was still there. After hearing that, it hurriedly swallowed a few ghosts in its mouth, quickly turned its thick body, and promised Tong Tong, "Don't worry, with the dragon and the little snake here, it will definitely be fine." After getting the spirit snake's assurance, Tong Tong heaved a sigh of relief. After saying goodbye to me, he flashed and disappeared into the sea of ghosts in front of us. Although I'd been urging her to leave, I didn't feel. Ever since I met Tong Tong in university, he had been by my side for many years and had never left me. This was the first time my eyes had left my field of vision. This kind of feeling was like a parent seeing their child carrying a backpack and about to go to university. Their hearts were filled with complicated feelings and were filled with fear. But very quickly, the snake spirit's croaky voice pulled me back from my thoughts. He chuckled and said to me, "Kid, don't worry. Whether that last Tong Tong is here or not, it doesn't matter from the outside. Sooner or later, I, Master Long, will devour all these Ean souls. Don't be afraid. Just follow behind me." As soon as Tong Tong left, he became arrogant. However, I didn't mind. The snake spirit was born with such a personality. There was no need to be calculated with him. I pretended that I didn't hear him when he said to follow behind him. If we were to stay and resist, one of us could block the ghosts. However, it would be hard for one person to take care of the surroundings if we were to move forward. This was also the reason why Tong Tong had asked the snake spirit to stay. While I was talking to Tong Tong, the snake spirit had been the only one supporting us. Hence, I waved the armor-removing sword and asked him to retreat to the back. Then, I continued to move forward. Tong Tong's departure would naturally help the fatty to ease the situation. However, I was still worried about them. Hence, my movements didn't slow down at all. I continued to move forward with all my might. After fighting for more than 10 minutes, Tong Tong finally sent me a message. Tong Tong and I were telepathically connected. We didn't need any talismans to communicate with each other. Tong Tong's voice arose in my head. "Brother, I'm at Brother Fatty's side. According to my estimation, the distance between the fatty and me was at least 10 kilometers. There were also ghosts blocking the way. Although they wouldn't attack Tong Tong, they would still slow us down. I didn't expect that she would come here that fast. Other than that, although Tong Tong and I are telepathically connected and can communicate directly, we have tried it before. We are separated by a few kilometers, so we are unable to communicate clearly. So, when she went over just now, I told her to contact me telepathically on the way. After she finds Fatty, if she is unable to contact him, let Fatty contact me through the sound transmitting talisman. With that in mind, I asked Tong Tong, how far are we from here? Tong pondered for a while. He estimated the distance to be around 10 kilometers. It was strange. However, I looked at the countless wisps of energy in the air. Perhaps the environment here was good for ghosts like Tong and the snake spirit. That was why it was like this. Of course, it wasn't important. I hurried to ask about the Fatty situation. Tong Tong's voice didn't sound relaxed. However, she told me that the Fatty was fine. He was just a little exhausted. She had come to help him. He'll be fine after he recovers. Just as I was about to heave a sigh of relief, Tong Tong said to me in a deep voice, however, big brother, you have to be careful over there. When I came over just now, I clearly felt a big fellow heading in your direction. You and the little snake should be careful. A big fellow? Tong Tong, what does she mean? I didn't get it. I wanted to ask again, but Tong Tong said anxiously, you have to help the Fatty stop the ghosts. You don't have time to talk to me. Please be careful. Then she went silent. This time, I couldn't ask more questions. I was on guard. Then I gathered with the snake spirit and continued to move forward. Around 10 minutes later, the snake spirit and I fought. However, we didn't move as far as before. I didn't know why the number of ghosts around us didn't decrease after we killed them. Quite the contrary, they seemed to have increased. The pressure on us had increased a lot. At this moment, the snake spirit was staring at the front, so I didn't feel much pressure. While recovering my true essence, I pondered. At this moment, the huge body of the snake spirit that was constantly moving forward suddenly stopped. It didn't swallow the spirits in front of it, but stopped. It lifted its head to look in the direction of the Fatty. Its snake face looked like a human, and it said to me in fright, Kid, over there seems to be a big guy coming. A big fellow? The thing Tong Tong just mentioned? Hearing him say that, I couldn't help but be curious. I tapped the ground with my right foot and leaped. I landed next to the snake spirit's dragon horn and lifted my head to look. Previously, when he was standing on the ground, he could only see the surrounding spirits moving in waves. However, when he stood on the head of the snake spirit, the scene was obviously different. The densely packed spirits were almost piled up into a mountain, as if the entire ground had been raised by a few inches. At a glance, it was far more terrifying than when he was standing on the ground. What frightened the serpent spirit was obviously not these spirits, but a huge creature floating above the heads of countless spirits. I focused and saw that the giant monster wasn't some strange monster. It was a one-wheeled, square-shaped chariot. For ghost warhorses pulled the chariot from the heads of the ghosts. It slowly moved toward us. In front of the chariot sat a ghost whose face I couldn't see clearly. The ghost wielded the whip in its hand. Sometimes the ghost's head would pop out from the chariot, but the whip would hit it. The lucky ones would fall back into the army of ghosts, and the unlucky ones would be turned into ashes. The chariot rolled forward. However, no matter if the chariot rolled over a ghost's head or the whip hit a ghost's head, it didn't make a sound. The surroundings were strangely quiet. Chapter 689. After a long while, the snake spirit turned to look at me. He shivered and asked, Joey, what should we do? This thing doesn't look easy to deal with. I didn't need him to tell me that this thing wasn't easy to deal with. I stared at the spirit for a while, then said to the snake spirit, don't be in a hurry. Let's observe the situation first. At first, I had some confidence in the current situation. However, after the appearance of this strange carriage, it was hard to say what would happen. Not to mention anything else, the spirit on the carriage was obviously sentient. If the appearance of this carriage made the other spirits have intelligence, or if they organized to attack us, the result would be unimaginable. However, the appearance of the carriage wasn't all bad. At the very least, the spirits around quieted down and didn't attack. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the time to observe the carriage. I lifted my head and saw that the carriage was moving very slowly. It looked like it was only 400 or 500 meters away from us, but after a long time, it had only moved dozens of meters. At this speed, it would take a few more minutes to reach us. I wanted to use this time to recover my true essence and come up with a plan. However, right at this moment, a shadow floated forward from the mist in the distance. I focused and saw that it was a similar war chariot. It followed the carriage from before in a straight line, maintaining the same speed as it slowly moved forward. The spirit snake also noticed the situation. It turned its huge head around and exchanged glances with me. There was fear in its eyes. With this fellow's personality, if I wasn't standing on his back, he would have run away already. I was also considering this problem. Although the war chariot that had suddenly appeared was strange, it was moving very slowly. If we turned around and ran, we would have a chance to escape. However, the problem was that the direction of the war chariot was the only way to the east. If we turned around and ran, we would be farther and farther away from the fatty and Tong Tong. Before I could make up my mind, the snake spirit's trembling voice came again. How? How could there be more? The spirit snake was a timid fellow, but sometimes when people were extremely timid, they would throw caution to the wind. When the spirit snake saw the third war chariot emerge from the gray mist in the distance, he went crazy. His eyes turned red and he shouted, wanting to fight against the war chariot. I quickly pulled him back. Although I called out to him, I wasn't going to turn around and run for my life. Tong Tong and the fatty were still in front of me. No matter what, I couldn't abandon them and run away by myself. The reason why I stopped the spirit snake was because I had made a new discovery. The three carriages moved slowly in a straight line. The ghosts along the way were split into two groups by the long whip of the ghost driving the carriages. The ones closest to us were still quiet and didn't move. They seemed to be waiting for orders. As for the spirits on the other side, they seemed to have received orders. After being separated, they left and floated towards the east. And to the east was where Tong Tong and Fatty were at this moment. In just a blink of an eye, I recognized that the soul in the war chariot was intelligent. They had divided the army of ghosts into two groups. It was clear that they wanted to surround us. After understanding this, my heart sank to the bottom. This was basically the worst-case scenario that I had anticipated. The only thought in my mind was that I had made a decision. I didn't know how many more war chariots were behind us. At this moment, not all of them had appeared. Moreover, the army of ghosts was still in a quiet state. It was the best time for us to break the siege. Of course, I wasn't going to break the siege. I was going to break the siege and head toward Tong Tong and the fatty. I had made up my mind. First of all, I couldn't give up on the fatty. Secondly, even if I gave up on him and took the spirit snake to run away, I wasn't familiar with this place. I couldn't tell if I could avoid the army of ghosts and find the exit. Thus, the best choice now was to meet up with the fatty and the others. Then, the four of us would join forces to deal with the ghosts and the war chariots that had suddenly appeared. After making up my mind, I looked to the east. According to our speed, the fatty and Tong Tong were less than 10 kilometers away from us. It wasn't impossible to run away from them. I quietly rubbed the spirit snake's neck and whispered to him, "We should take advantage of the time when they haven't caught up to us. What do you think?" Although the spirit snake was scared to the point that he was about to go crazy, he pulled himself together after hearing that I wanted to run away. He nodded and said, "I think so too. We shouldn't delay any longer. Let's go." He agreed so quickly that he didn't react even when I told him that we should go near the war chariots. He just urged me to move faster. At this moment, the true essence in my body had recovered a lot. I took a deep breath and covered my legs with true essence. Then I said to the spirit snake, "I'm going to count to 3. Let's go there together. As long as we can get past the war chariots, we can move forward quickly and meet up with the fatty and the others. It shouldn't be a problem." The spirit snake nodded and took a deep breath. His body swelled up and hissed. He was ready to run away. I licked my lips and counted to 3. As soon as I said that, the spirit snake, which had been waiting for a long time, shot out like lightning and carried me on its back, heading towards the east. There was an ancient saying that the dragon followed the clouds, while the tiger followed the wind. After the spirit snake had transformed into a flood dragon, it had comprehended some divine powers. At this moment, its body was covered in clouds and mist. Its speed was much faster than when I was flying. In the blink of an eye, we arrived next to the war chariot that had appeared first. Because of the distance and the mist in the air, we couldn't see the appearance of the spirit driving the chariot. Now that we were in front of it, I lifted my head and saw it clearly. The spirit in the war chariot looked similar to the ghost general in the ghost army. It was just that its body was taller and it was wrapped in black armor. There was a faint green light in its eyes. Our sudden attack was out of the ghost general's expectation. He reacted only when we were close to him. He wielded the long whip in his hand, aiming at us. From a distance, the long whip looked very thin. However, when we got closer, we found that it was as thick as a bowl. When it was swung, the air crackled. Compared to the ghost general and the long whip in his hand, my body was small. I bent my body and dodged the whip easily. However, the spirit snake's body was huge, so it wasn't easy to dodge it. After a loud explosion, the whip lashed at the spot where I had dodged. It hit the spirit snake's back. This whip seemed to have a special restraining effect on ghosts. I could tell this from the way the ghost general had chased the other ghosts away. The spirit snake's body was solid, but after getting hit by the whip, a part of its body shattered. It turned into a mass of gray mist and vanished into the air. At the same time, the spirit snake screamed. It was in extreme pain. I turned to look. After his roar, a large number of ghosts in front of him vanished, leaving a large, empty space. Looking at the spirit snake's painful face, I felt distressed and scared. I didn't know what would have happened if I hadn't dodged the whip. As for the carriage in front of them, after Gue Jiang lashed out with his whip, he sat there coldly without any expression. He retracted his whip and lashed out at the serpent spirit again. His movements didn't look fast, and I could see the trajectory of the whip in the air clearly. However, it was extremely fast. I hadn't reacted yet, and the whip had already traveled halfway to the spirit snake's body. I was anxious. I held the armor-stripping sword in my hand and used the emotionless sword path to slash the whip. At the same time I took action, the spirit snake lifted its head and roared at the whip and the ghost general. I felt strange. The whip hadn't lashed yet. So why was the spirit snake roaring? What was the point of that? Before I could figure out, a scorching flame shot out from the snake spirit's mouth, heading toward the whip and the descending ghost, dragon flame. I opened my eyes wide. Chapter 690. Under different temperatures, flames would have different colors. Generally speaking, the most common color was red. At this moment, the temperature of the flame was below 1,000 degrees. As the temperature rose, the flame would turn from red to white. At this moment, the temperature had reached 1,500 degrees. If the temperature continued to rise, the flame would turn white-blue and then sky-blue. In ancient times, there was a saying that said, "The indigo surpassed the indigo." That was why people used cyan to refer blue. Therefore, the term perfection meant that the flame had burned to its peak. At this moment, the dragon flame that the spirit serpent spat out was sky blue. With an extremely high temperature, it dashed toward the ghost general. Fire had the power to expel evil spirits. This high-temperature dragon flame had the power to subdue ghosts and spirits. Moreover, the dragon flame was the pinnacle of fire. As soon as it was spat out, the long whip in the ghost general's hand melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, only the whip was left. Then, the dragon flame covered the ghost general's body. In just a blink of an eye, it had turned into a giant torch. The carriage behind it, which had gathered energy, was also set ablaze. Even for ghosts, being burned by the raging flames was extremely painful. However, the ghost general didn't make a sound even when his body was completely burned. He just stood there quietly, his green eyes gazing at me and the spirit serpent. Although his gaze gave me goosebumps, I heaved a sigh of relief. The spirit serpent was usually arrogant. Whenever he got something, he couldn't wait to show it off. I didn't expect that he would keep it for himself. He even had a life-saving skill. I turned around and was about to praise the spirit serpent. Unexpectedly, he was floating in the air, his eyes gazing at the burning ghost general. His face was blank. I immediately came to a realization. This fellow, could it be that he had just comprehended the dragon flame skill and didn't know about it? Before I could ask, the spirit serpent suddenly roared. He lifted his big head and faced the sky, laughing. Dragon flame? Grandpa Snake. No, Grandpa Dragon, I can spit dragon flame now. From now on, I'm a real dragon. His croaky voice was so unpleasant that it sounded like he was in heat. I looked at him speechlessly and asked, "Is this your first time using dragon flames?" The snake spirit nodded and couldn't hide the joy in its voice. It grinned and said, "Yes, I don't know what happened just now, but I suddenly became very angry. I opened my mouth and spat. I spat out dragon flame. I'm a genius." This fellow, I was speechless, but I was also happy for him. The spirit snake had always wanted to transform into a dragon, but it was the same as a human cultivator becoming an immortal. The probability was too low. However, now that he had comprehended the power of dragon flame, he might be able to turn into a true dragon in the future. Before I could say anything, the snake spirit exclaimed, "This guy's also a ghost. Although he's half roasted, we can still eat him, right?" After saying that, he immediately opened his mouth and swallowed the burning giant ghost general into his stomach. I was startled. I wanted to remind him that the ghost descendant's body was covered in dragon flames. However, before I could open my mouth, I realized that the dragon flames had been spat out by the snake spirit. If I swallowed it back, it wouldn't have any effect on me. It turned out that the dragon flames didn't affect the snake spirit. After swallowing the ghost general, the snake spirit smacked his lips and closed his eyes for a while. Then he said to me with a face full of surprise, "If I swallow one of these ghosts, the benefits I get will be much greater than if I had swallowed tens of thousands of them. If I can swallow tens of thousands of them, I might even be able to turn into a dragon." The snake spirit was so excited that he shook his head. I was also happy for him. However, before we could rejoice for long, a black shadow flashed next to us. It was another war chariot floating not far from us. Not only that, but more chariots emerged from the fog in the distance. Their speed was much faster than before, and they were all heading in the same direction. All of them were heading to surround us. I frowned and hurried to ask the snake spirit, "What's the cultivation base of these ghosts?" Since I hadn't attacked them, I couldn't judge the ghost general's strength. I could only ask the snake spirit. The snake spirit was still excited and didn't notice the chariots in the distance. He grinned and said to me, "Their strength is just so. Compared to me, they're about the same. Just you wait. Master Long, will swallow this one as well." About the same? I frowned and felt suspicious. If the ghost general's strength was about the same as the snake spirit, how could he have dispersed the snake spirit's spirit energy with just one whip? Moreover, the power of the snake spirit's dragon flames wasn't small. According to the talisman scripture, the flames of the golden talisman couldn't reach the sky blue level. The golden talisman had the cultivation base of a young god. How could he use such a powerful talisman to deal with a ghost general at the same realm as him? Seeing my doubt, the snake spirit shook his head embarrassedly and said, "I mean, he's a little stronger than me, but he's not my dragon flames opponent. So, in terms of overall strength, he's about the same." This time, I couldn't say anything. The snake spirit's current cultivation base had reached the late stage of the seal realm and was close to the peak. As for the a little, it wasn't really a little. It meant that these ghost generals had the power of a young god. A young god celestial master wasn't a big deal. Recently, I had seen many young god celestial masters, and I had even fought against some of them. With my current strength, I wouldn't be scared of a young god celestial master. However, there were only two of us. The snake spirit had a whole row of ghost generals, and I couldn't see the end of them. Seeing that the snake spirit didn't care about the ghost generals, I held on to my last hope and asked, "How many times can you use your dragon flame?" Hearing my question, the snake spirit sounded a little embarrassed. He said, "After I absorb the soul in my stomach, I can probably use it one more time." My face darkened. This fellow meant that I couldn't use the dragon flame anymore. Facing a group of ghost generals at the Yon God level, the snake spirit's trump card couldn't be used. I didn't need to think and made a decision. Run. I patted the snake spirit's big head, urging him to run away. The snake spirit was still bewildered. He didn't move and looked at me suspiciously. "Why are you running? We just killed one. Let's join hands and kill this one. I'll swallow it." I cut him off with a slap and pointed into the distance. The snake spirit lifted his head and looked in the direction I was pointing at. Finally, he saw the carriages that were speeding toward us. He shivered and stopped talking about swallowing the ghost generals. He swung his tail and used the cloud control technique again. His body shot out like lightning. Judging from the previous fight, although these ghost generals are very strong, speed doesn't seem to be their strong point. Moreover, the snake spirit's cloud control technique is very fast. In a short period of time, these ghost generals definitely won't be able to catch up. We'd better meet up with Tong Tong and Fatty first, then we'll plan our next move. As soon as I heaved a sigh of relief, I turned around and opened my eyes wide. Unknowingly, the long whips in the hands of the ghost generals behind him had lashed out at the ghost horse that was driving the carriage. The originally scattered ghost horse actually started to gallop after feeling the pain. Looking at its speed, it seemed to be no slower than the snake spirit's cloud controlling technique. I could even feel that the distance between us and the ghost generals was getting closer and closer. Looking at the ghost generals that had gathered and were urging their horses to gallop, I shivered just like the snake spirit. Then, I patted the snake spirit's head to urge him to speed up. The snake spirit also saw the situation behind us. He didn't need to say anything. His body swelled up, and he sped up one more time. However, no matter how fast he sped up, the carriages behind us were getting closer and closer. We couldn't shake them off. The Insol horses that were pulling the carriages glowed with green light. Wisps of gray mist entered their bodies from the surrounding air, which looked really strange. Once they caught up with us, the snake spirit, and I wouldn't be able to deal with them. Fortunately, I wasn't far from where Tong Tong and the Fatty were. I could faintly see flashes of lightning from afar. That was the lightning that Tong Tong used when he used his Heaven's Lightning technique. I was happy and wanted to urge the snake spirit to speed up. However, I suddenly heard a hissing sound behind us. It wasn't a roar. It was the explosive sound of something tearing the air at a fast speed. I reacted quickly. It was the whip in the ghost general's hand. I didn't have time to dodge. I had to move my body and turn around. Before I could see the situation behind me, I heard the snake spirit's hissing sound. It was obvious that the ghost general had lashed the snake spirit. Feeling the pain, the snake spirit instinctively arched its body. However, its speed slowed down. Before we could react, several shadows flashed. Countless carriages appeared in front of us. Chapter 691. I lifted my head and looked in front of me. There were 6 carriages in front of us. The 6 carriages looked the same, and even the ghost general on them looked exactly the same as the one that the snake spirit had swallowed. It meant that there were 6 young god celestial masters blocking our way. Although I had seen many young god celestial masters and fought against them, I had never thought that I would have to fight against 6 young god celestial masters at the same time. The snake spirit also realized the seriousness of the problem. He turned his head pitifully and exchanged glances with me. His eyes were no longer as arrogant as before. He asked with a trembling voice, Joey, what should we do?" I gritted my teeth. "We can't stop. Continue to speed up. We have to rush forward." The snake spirit howled when he heard what I said. "How can we rush forward? 6 of them. If we rush forward, we will be courting death." I turned around and looked at the carriages that were still rushing toward us. I shouted at the snake spirit, "Listen to me. Speed up. If we rush forward, we will have a chance to survive. If we stay, We will be courting death. The carriages behind us were endless, and I couldn't see the end of them. If we rushed forward, we would have to face 6 ghost generals. However, if we stopped and waited for the carriages behind us to gather, we would have to face 60 or even 600 of them. I didn't need to make a decision. I knew what to do. The snake spirit followed my gaze and looked at the carriages behind us. He seemed to understand the reason behind it. He suddenly swung his huge head and said fiercely, "All right, I will listen to you. Let's rush forward." After he said that, he swung his enormous tail and used the cloud controlling technique once again. His body turned into a black light, bringing me along as he charged towards the 6 carriages in front of us. After the snake spirit had made his move, his speed was much faster than before. In just a blink of an eye, we were in front of the 6 carriages. The snake spirit's huge head fiercely slammed forward. Right at this moment, the 6 ghost generals in front of us suddenly got up from their carriages and lashed out with their 6 whips. In just a blink of an eye, the shadows of the whips appeared in front of us, creating a thick wall of energy in the air. Just now, the whip had struck the serpent spirit's body twice, directly breaking his body into 2 pieces. At this moment, the wall of Enchi in front of him was completely formed by the shadow of a whip. If the serpent spirit were to directly crash into it, it would probably be torn into pieces. Of course, I couldn't let that happen. Standing on the back of the spirit snake, I stomped on the ground and executed the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps at the same time. The Taoist aura and witchcraft aura in my body surged towards the armor removal sword. Immediately after that, I flicked my wrist. In an instant, dozens of sword auras were sent out. After the sword chi left his body, it formed countless white shadows in the air and rushed towards the wall of Enchi. At the same time, the saint's seal appeared above my head. Previously, after absorbing the power of the heaven's punishment, my saint's seal had left behind a circle of golden light. At this moment, when I took out the seal, the golden light on it left the seal under my control. It mixed with the countless white shadows and shot towards the high wall. My cultivation base hadn't reached the Yang God realm. Although I had the support of the armor removal sword and the sentient sword technique, the power contained in each of my sword auras had just surpassed that of the seal heavenly master. There is still a big gap between me and the Yang God realm. Even with the power of the heaven's punishment absorbed by the seal, I still couldn't resist the combined power of the 6 ghost generals. However, my goal wasn't to kill the ghost generals. I just wanted to disperse them. That should be enough. In fact, the power of the heaven's punishment was stronger than I had imagined. The golden light immediately attached to the high wall of Enchi. In just a blink of an eye, the thick wall of Enchi collapsed, and the 6 whip shadows reappeared. Right after that, countless sword auras whistled and came, entangling with the whip shadows. The speed of the serpent spirit wasn't much slower than the sword auras. It didn't wait for the sword auras and the whip shadows to decide the winner and the winner. The sword auras whistled, the whip shadows exploded, and the serpent spirit roared at the same time. I crouched down and stuck close to the serpent spirit's back. I felt as if I had fallen into a deep whirlpool. My body swayed back and forth. Countless chaotic forces swept through my surroundings, tearing many holes in my clothes. Finally, when the serpent spirit's roar ended, I felt the air around me calm down. I lifted my head and looked around. The serpent spirit had successfully rushed out of the whip shadows. However, his huge body was extremely miserable at this moment. It was as if countless steel knives had slashed his body at the same time. His entire body was covered in wounds, and his body was shivering. Apparently, he was in extreme pain. I hurriedly asked, "How are you feeling? Can you hold on?" The serpent spirit was a hooligan. When he was scared to the extreme, he would become crazy. At this moment, he didn't scream in pain. He took a deep breath and screamed, "I'm okay." Then, he swung his tail and didn't rush forward. Instead, he turned around and looked at the 6 carriages. The serpent spirit didn't wait for me to ask and said, "We can't compete with them in terms of speed. If we continue to run, they will catch up with us sooner or later." I didn't understand what he meant. I said worriedly, "We have to run." We can't turn around and die. The serpent spirit suddenly grinned. Of course, I'm not going to turn around and die. I'm going to turn around and swallow those F***ers. What? I was startled. I thought that the serpent spirit's brain had gone haywire. Just now, with the combined strength of the two of us, we were barely able to block the attack of the 6 ghost generals. It wasn't easy for us to escape with our lives, but now we want to turn around and devour them. If this isn't madness, then what is? However, I was currently on the back of the spirit snake, so I couldn't stop him even if I wanted to. I could only watch as he lifted his head and faced the 6 carriages that were chasing after us. He opened his mouth wide and let out another earth-shattering roar. In that instant, I understood everything. The serpent spirit wasn't going to die. He could spit dragon flames again. The cultivation base of an soul was slightly lower than that of a human cultivator at the same realm. Moreover, the serpent spirit's dragon flames were one of the divine powers of the true dragon. It wasn't something an ordinary young spirit could resist, not even the 6 ghost generals. The sky blue flame column appeared again. Under this terrifying heat, everything became flammable. In just a blink of an eye, the carriage closest to the serpent spirit was engulfed in the dragon flames and burned fiercely. Right after that, the energy in the air was also ignited. The other 5 carriages didn't have time to stop and rushed into the flames one after another. Each of the palanquins that the ghost generals were riding was enormous. When the 6 palanquins were ignited at the same time, the fire was earth-shaking. It even created an isolated area between us and the other palanquins that were chasing after us. When the serpent spirit's dragon flames had burned a ghost general to death, I was amazed by the power of the dragon flames. But now, it seemed that I had underestimated them. The fire of the dragon flames had given the serpent spirit and me time to run. At this moment, we were very close to the Fatty and Tong Tong. If we ran at full speed, we would be able to reach them before the other ghost generals caught up with us. I urged the serpent spirit to run away. However, the serpent spirit shook its head. It didn't run away. Instead, it pointed at the ghost generals that were buried in the sea of fire. It gritted its teeth and said, "Wait for me to swallow them. It won't be too late to run then. My dragon flames have consumed a lot of energy. With my current cultivation base, I can only spit out a mouthful of dragon flames. However, if I can swallow the power of the ghost generals, I can borrow their energy to spit out another mouthful of dragon flames." The second mouthful of dragon flames was the power I had absorbed from the ghost general I had swallowed earlier. This time, the spirit snake didn't wait for me to ask. It explained everything to me. Then, it didn't even turn its head to look at the remains of the fireworks. It opened its big mouth and accurately swallowed the 6 ghost generals, who had been burned to the point that they couldn't move. After everything was done, the serpent spirit exhaled in midair. It seemed to burp. Then it turned to me and said, "All right, let's go." Then it dashed forward. Its speed skyrocketed as it dashed toward the place where the lightning had flashed. Chapter 692. What's wrong with the serpent spirit? I stooped to look at the serpent spirit's head. A strange feeling arose in my heart. In the past, the serpent spirit was cowardly. He didn't have any idea what to do. He would listen to either Tong Tong or me. However, the serpent spirit didn't listen to me at all. He was very assertive. He didn't even ask for my opinion before he made his decision. More importantly, he gave me the feeling that he was giving me orders. It was completely different from his usual cheerful appearance. It was as if he had become a completely different person. Most unbelievable of all was that he had suddenly become extremely daring. After killing the 6 ghostly generals with a mouthful of dragon flame, he hadn't been thinking about running away. Instead, he had been thinking about turning around and taking advantage of the fact that the other ghostly generals couldn't cross the sea of flames to devour the 6 ghostly generals. His actions were resolute, ruthless, and cold. He didn't look like the previous serpent spirit at all. I was shocked and didn't say anything for quite a long time. After the serpent spirit had swallowed the 6 ghost generals, he was also trying his best to digest them. In silence, We continued to move forward for several kilometers. I lifted my head and saw more flashes of lightning in the distance. At the same time, a large group of ghosts was moving in another direction. Tong Tong and the fatty were definitely there. I was so happy that I forgot about the strange behavior of the serpent spirit. I urged him to fly toward that direction. Since the serpent spirit was trying its best to digest the ghost generals in its stomach, its speed wasn't as fast as before. However, it wasn't slow either. With just a flick of its tail, it had crossed half of the distance in just a blink of an eye. When I arrived there, I lifted my eyes and could see the situation clearly. The fatty was sitting cross-legged on the ground. His clothes were ragged, and there was a blood stain on his chin. Apparently, he was hurt badly. However, he was fiddling with something in his hands. I guess it was some kind of formation. Tong Tong stood in front of the fatty to protect him. She was fighting against a ghost general that was riding a carriage. In terms of strength, Tong Tong's current cultivation was not as good as the snake spirit, but her heavenly thunder technique was the nemesis of these spirits. Therefore, when facing a ghost general alone, she could barely deal with it by relying on the miraculous heavenly thunder in her hand. On the other hand, although there were still countless spirits surrounding us, the situation was the same as before. With the ghost general around, the spirits only surrounded us and didn't attack us. This reduced the pressure on them and prevented them from being attacked from both sides. It also allowed the injured fatty to take a breather. Seeing that they were in good condition, my worried heart finally calmed down. I hurried to urge the snake spirit to go there. However, it would have been better if I hadn't said anything. As soon as I spoke, the spirit snake suddenly twisted its body. It circled around Tong Tong and the fatty and dashed to the side. I was bewildered. Before I could open my mouth to ask the spirit snake, I heard someone scream behind me. I turned around and saw the ghost generals chasing after us. At this moment, the spirit snake's voice came to me. Their cultivation bases aren't high enough. If they meet up and lure the ghost generals over, we won't have time to protect them. We'd better lure those things away first. After listening to his explanation, I finally understood his plan. However, I felt that it was strange. Such a wise and decisive judgment shouldn't be the spirit snake's behavior. It was a critical moment, and I didn't have time to think too much. I suppressed the doubts in my heart. The spirit snake flew forward and circled to the left side of Tong Tong and the fatty. The ghost generals behind them also chased after them. Just now, the serpent spirit had gone all out, but its speed was no match for the ghost generals. Naturally, it was no match for them now. Therefore, after bypassing Tong Tong and fatty, the serpent spirit stopped in its tracks. Its body suddenly turned around and faced the ghost generals that were chasing after it. Seeing the spirit snakes move, the ghost generals behind us swung their long whips and urged the ghost horse. Their speed increased again. Shortly after, they roared and charged toward the spirit snake and me. I looked around and found that there were 2 more ghost generals chasing after us this time. There were 8 of them in total. Moreover, I could see the silhouettes of the other carriages in the distance. This time, there was no fire to block us. As long as we were restrained, the ghost generals behind us would chase after us. After understanding the situation, I hurried to ask the spirit snake, "How is it? Has your dragon flames recovered?" I thought that the spirit snake must have something to rely on if it had taken the initiative to stop running. Unexpectedly, it shook its head when it heard my question. "It hasn't recovered yet. It will probably take another quarter of an hour. We have to endure through this period." 15 minutes. 1 minute was 15 minutes, and 15 minutes was 7 or 8 minutes. It wasn't a long time, but those ghost generals were ruthless. They wouldn't let us endure it easily. I wanted to ask the spirit snake if he had any other tricks, but I swallow my words. No matter what had happened to the spirit snake, he had tried his best. The situation was dangerous, and he needed to absorb the ghost generals to recover his dragon flames. That was why I couldn't rely on him. I had to think of a way to endure this 15 minutes. I looked up and saw that the 8 ghost generals were charging at us. They would reach us in a flash. Although we could see the silhouettes of the ghost generals in the distance, they were still quite far away. It would take around 15 minutes for them to reach us. That was why I only needed to face the 8 ghost generals in front of me. The 8 ghost generals were equivalent to 8 young god celestial masters. I wasn't a match for them in terms of power. However, I didn't need to win. I just needed to resist them. It wasn't as if I didn't have to win. All kinds of thoughts flashed through my mind, and I quickly made up my mind. I reached out my hand and took out a bunch of talismans. Although there were many talismans, there were only 2 types. One was golden light, and the other was pure yang. On the path of cultivation, the first yang god celestial master I had met was Yin Nantian. At that time, he had used his yang god power to kill me, but I had used the golden light talisman and the earth-carrying formation to stop him. At that time, Yin Nantian didn't have a physical body and only had the yang god power. He had been tortured for many years, and his power had been greatly reduced. Moreover, I had used the true dragon's vein to attract the Yin Corp's sex attention so that Yin Nantian couldn't focus on dealing with me. That was how I managed to survive his yang god power. Even so, the golden light talisman and the earth-carrying formation were very useful. At that time, I only had an acupoint ceiling cultivation base and hadn't reached the wisdom realm yet. Compared to Yin Nantian, who was a yang god celestial master, I was thousands of miles away. If I could use it to deal with Yin Nantian, I could use it to temporarily resist the 8 ghost generals. I took a deep breath and threw the talismans in my hand to the ghost generals. The moment the talismans left my hand, the true essence in my body flowed out to activate all the talismans. At the same time, the hand seals and incantations that matched the 2 talismans appeared. In the blink of an eye, the golden light talisman flashed and formed a thick golden ring that enveloped me and the snake's spirit. At the same time, the pure yang talisman turned into a flame that filled the sky and fused with the golden light talisman, wrapping around the golden ring. Although it didn't emit a sky blue flame like the snake spirit's dragon flame, the flame was white and had a high temperature. Now that I had the heavenly master cultivation base, the talismans I could make were much better than before. As soon as the thick white flame and golden light barrier appeared, the 8 ghost generals arrived in front of us. However, they were startled by the white flame. Dozens of Yin soul horses leaped and hovered in the air for a while. Then, they halted their steps. The ghost generals had witnessed the power of the snake spirit's dragon flame, so they were very afraid of it. After being stopped, they became very cautious. Faint blue lights shone in their eyes as they gazed at the white flame emitted by the pure yang talismans. It seemed they were thinking about how to deal with it. After seeing the effects of the 2 talismans, I calmed down a lot. However, I didn't dare to lower my guard. I took out the other talismans from Xiang Lu's leather pouch and started to calculate the positions to prepare the earth-carrying formation. Since the earth-carrying formation had a strong defense, it could save one's life at a critical moment. Ever since I had escaped from the Yin Corp's sect, I had studied it many times and was very familiar with its positions. It only took me less than 10 seconds to have a well-thought-out plan. I threw the talismans in my hand and placed the earth-carrying formation around the snake spirit's body. Chapter 693. The ghost generals had yang spirit cultivation base, so their intellect wasn't lower than ordinary people's. They seemed to be afraid of what I was doing. They stood there in silence for around 3 minutes. They didn't move or communicate with me. I didn't know what they were thinking. I calculated the time. From the time I had cast the talismans to the time I had set up the formation, half of the time had passed. If they continued to wait until the snake spirit's dragon flame recovered, it would be a great success. While I was thinking about that, the 8 ghost generals suddenly moved. However, it was strange that they didn't wave the whips in their hands or attack the protective fire cage around us. Instead, they split into 2 groups, one on the left and one on the right. At first, I didn't react. I didn't know what they were going to do, but soon my face changed. It was obvious that the 8 ghost generals wanted to circle behind us to attack us. Although the snake spirit's dragon flame was fierce, it wasn't as fast as the ghost generals. These ghost generals had circled behind us. They didn't need to attack us, nor did they need to face the serpent spirit's dragon flame. They just needed to stall us and wait for the other ghost generals to catch up. Then, the serpent spirit's dragon flame wouldn't be able to do anything. In just a blink of an eye, I had figured out Ghost General's plan. However, the Ghost General's plan was an open one, and they didn't hide anything. Even if I could see through them, I couldn't stop them. At this moment, the snake spirit was cultivating with its eyes closed. It wanted to absorb the Ghost General's energy as fast as possible. I couldn't talk to it, so I could only worry. Over the next 5 minutes, many ideas popped up in my head. However, under the absolute power of the Ghost Generals, none of them were feasible. However, I had a clear view of the situation in front of me. Whether the snake spirit and I could escape or not depended on whether we could break the blockade of the 8 Ghost Generals before the Ghost Generals' army caught up with us. At this moment, the only effective method to deal with the 8 Ghost Generals was the snake spirit's dragon flame. Thus, our only hope was the snake spirit. If he could kill the 8 Ghost Generals, we would be able to escape. If he couldn't, I was afraid we wouldn't be able to survive today. If the power of the dragon flame could kill 6 Ghost Generals, it should be able to kill 8 as well. However, the problem was that with the Ghost General's intelligence, it was unlikely that he would give the snake spirit a chance. While he was deep in thought, a quarter of an hour had passed. The spirit snake's body shook and it opened its eyes. At this moment, the army of Ghost Generals wasn't far from us. I didn't need to explain the situation. The spirit snake looked around and understood everything. After he finished reading, I told him, "Those 8 Ghost Generals are behind us. They want to delay us. We have to brace ourselves and attack them. If we can kill them, we can survive. If we can't," before I could finish talking, a shadow approached us from a distance. The army of Ghost Generals was right in front of us. Their carriages looked like a giant black serpent slithering toward us. I immediately stopped talking and urged the spirit snake to move. The snake spirit did not speak. Instead, it was silent for a moment. Then its body suddenly rushed out. It did not turn around and rush towards the 8 Ghost Generals. Instead, it rushed towards the army of Ghost Generals that was rapidly approaching. I opened my eyes wide. I didn't know what the snake spirit wanted to do. I screamed at him to stop. However, he didn't budge. He even urged his cloud control technique to increase his speed to the max. The army of Ghost Generals was also rushing toward us. When both sides sped up, their relative speed reached the max. In just a blink of an eye, the snake spirit had reached the front of the army of Ghost Generals. At this moment, his body jerked. He lifted his head and roared. The sky-blue dragon flame shot out one more time, aiming at the army of Ghost Generals. Due to the high relative speed and the snake spirit's sudden action, the army of Ghost Generals couldn't react in time. The 2 carriages at the front were directly engulfed in the dragon flame. The raging flame soared into the sky, reaching dozens of meters high. It looked as if it could burn the sky. These are just 2 carriages. Behind these 2 carriages, the rest of the Ghost Generals could not stop for the time being. It was very similar to the situation when the snake spirit killed the 6 Ghost Generals. Several carriages behind rushed into the sea of fire one after another, causing the fire to soar into the sky. Shortly after, more than 10 carriages had entered the sea of fire. The army of Ghost Generals finally stopped. They gathered their troops and stood by the edge of a sea of fire. The green light in the Ghost Generals' eyes became brighter. They looked at us through the sea of fire. I had to admit that the snake spirit had done a good job. 1 dragon flame had killed more than 10 Ghost Generals. The result was even better than before. However, my heart was ice cold. The army of Ghost Generals in the distance was endless, but the snake spirit had only used 1 dragon flame, let alone killing more than 10 Ghost Generals. Even if we could kill dozens, hundreds, or even the entire army of Ghost Generals, what could we do? Without the power of the dragon flame, we didn't need to worry about the army of Ghost Generals. The 8 Ghost Generals behind us were enough to kill me and the snake spirit. Thus, what the snake spirit had done was useless. I stooped to look at the snake spirit. I had thought that he had become wise and independent. But now, I could only see his impulsiveness and greed. In my opinion, there was only one reason why he had chosen to spit the dragon flame at the army of ghosts. He wanted to swallow more ghost generals. Those ghost generals were made of pure Een energy, and they had yang spirit cultivation base. If the snake spirit could swallow them, it would benefit him a lot. However, if he was alive to swallow, he had to be alive to digest them. The snake spirit was greedy, but he didn't care about the consequences. In the end, he would kill himself and me. I was desperate. I didn't even have the mood to scold the snake spirit. I was worried about Tong Tong and the fatty. Although they were having a hard time resisting, the fatty had the sky measuring ruler. He could use it as his last resort. If he was lucky, he could take Tong Tong and escape this damn place. Before we came here, we had prepared this method to prevent Lu Jinyang from turning against us. I didn't expect that we would have to use it here. Moreover, I didn't expect that it would be the fatty and Tong Tong who would use this method, not me. Fortunately, there was no contract between Tong Tong and me. I didn't use any enslavement or taming techniques on her. That was why she wouldn't be affected if something happened to me. While I was ready to die, the snake spirit's body swayed. Just as I had expected, it dashed into the sea of fire. When it reached the edge, it opened its big mouth and swallowed more than 10 ghost generals in the sea of fire. After everything was done, the spirit snake retreated and returned to our original position. Then, it turned its huge head and said to me, "Prepare yourself. We're going to deal with the 8 ghost generals. When the time comes, we'll attack together and try to kill all of them." I was bewildered. Then, I forced a smile. Those are 8 ghost generals at the yang spirit level. Without the dragon flame, we can't even protect ourselves. How can we kill them? The snake spirit glanced at me and shook its head. How do you know that I don't have the dragon flame? I just absorbed the Een energy of 6 ghost generals. With enough Een energy, I can use the dragon flame twice. One time to stop the soldiers behind us, and the other time to deal with the ambush in front of us. It's just enough. What? I gawked. The snake spirit could use the dragon flame twice? No wonder he didn't hesitate to bite the army of ghost generals behind us. I thought he was too greedy. I didn't expect that he had calculated everything. At this moment, it was as if the clouds had been dispelled and the sun had appeared. The situation in front of us became clear, and all my worries were swept away. I regained my confidence. The army of ghosts was temporarily hindered, and they couldn't chase after us for a short time. As for the 8 ghost generals, the snake spirit could use the dragon flame once. Although it wasn't realistic to kill all of them with the 2 of us, they wouldn't be able to stop us. The spirit snake carried me and turned around. We were ready to deal with the 8 ghost generals. However, when we turned around and looked in front of us, we were dumbfounded. The area in front of us was empty. The 8 ghost generals were nowhere to be seen. We didn't know where they had gone. Did they know that they couldn't deal with us in this situation, so they left? Chapter 694. The ghost generals in front of us hadn't shown up, and the ones behind us were blocked by the sea of fire. The danger was temporarily gone. Then, I discussed with the serpent spirit where we should go. Our first choice would obviously be to immediately meet up with the fatty and Tong Tong. However, the ghost generals behind us that were blocked by the sea of fire were still chasing us relentlessly. Secondly, the 8 ghost generals that had disappeared could still be hiding in the dark. If we were to meet up now, it would very likely bring disaster to them. Thus, after discussing for a while, the serpent spirit and I decided to move forward. We would take a big detour and return to where the fatty and Tong Tong were. That way, we would have some buffer time. If the ghost generals came again, we wouldn't bring disaster to the fatty and Tong Tong. If they didn't come again, we wouldn't miss this good opportunity. After making up our mind, the serpent spirit urged the cloud-controlling technique and dashed away. This time, the sea of fire behind us was bigger. If the ghost generals wanted to bypass the sea of fire and chase us, they would need more time. During this time, as long as the serpent spirit and I could run far away, the ghost generals wouldn't be able to catch up with us. During the rest of the journey, the serpent spirit and I didn't talk. We just hurried on our way. Today, the serpent spirit was behaving strangely. It was different from its usual self. However, it wasn't a good time to ask. I had to suppress my doubts for the time being. The ancient battlefield was vast. From our initial location to the fatty's location, we had traveled dozens of kilometers. When we reached the fatty's location, we bypassed him and continued to move forward. Now, we had traveled dozens of kilometers, but there was still no end in front of us. There was nothing but thick mist and clouds. We couldn't see the end of the place. I had guessed that this place was a strange space. However, no matter how strange this space was, it would always have an end. For example, Wanwu Grotto Heaven is a strange grotto heaven hidden in Wanwu Mountain. I stayed there for many days and also walked around. Every time I came to the border, I would see a dangerous place. That is the hidden border. The Wanwu Grotto Heaven was already one of the largest grotto heavens among all the grotto heavens, but compared to this place, it paled in comparison. It was truly unknown how this ancient battlefield was formed. With this thought in mind, we continued to move forward for around 10 minutes. However, we still hadn't found the border. According to the serpent spirit in my plan, we couldn't move forward in a straight line. We had to make a detour to return to the fatty's location. I had to give up. I asked the spirit snake to turn to the right and take a detour. While I was moving forward, I had the thought of searching for the exit. Since I couldn't find anything, I could only give up on that idea. I'll meet up with the fatty and ask him if he found anything. If it really doesn't work, I can only choose to use the measuring heaven ruler. Fatty had said before that the cracks on the heaven measuring ruler were very serious. It was very likely that it would be destroyed after a single use. If that was really the case, it would be difficult for them to continue following Lu Jinyang to Chiyo's tomb. Of course, there was still no news of Lu Jinyang. Something might have really happened to him. If that's the case, it's not bad. I only need to break through from Wu Yue's side and find a second volume of the Death Scripture myself. As we were thinking about this, we quickly headed to the right for dozens of miles. The spirit snake estimated the distance and then turned to the right, heading back to where the fatty was. It was very quiet along the way. Not to mention the ghost generals. Not even the Een spirits could be seen. There were only countless broken bones on the ground, stretching as far as the eye could see. No situation was the best-case scenario. My heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally calmed down a little. I started to worry about the fatty and the others. The ghost generals that had been chasing us were blocked. Moreover, they had passed by the fatty and Tong Tong on their way. If the ghost generals found out that they couldn't cross the sea of fire, they would turn around and attack the fatty and Tong Tong. Although the fatty had the measuring heaven ruler and could use it at any time, I was sure that he knew the situation clearly. Before I arrived, he wouldn't use it alone. While I was worried about this, the spirit snake suddenly lifted its big head and said, "Not good." What? I couldn't react in time. I looked around but didn't see any movement. I hurried to ask the spirit snake. While asking, I used the heavenly insight technique to look around. This time, I didn't need the spirit snake to answer. I could see the ghost generals chasing us from distance. And this time, they weren't coming from just one direction. They were coming from all directions. Countless Een spirit horses and carriages came from all directions. Just like before, they didn't make any noise. We didn't notice them until it was too late. The spirit snake could use its dragon flames one more time, but where could it spit them? From what I could see, I didn't know how many ghost generals there were. I couldn't see the end of them. The spirit snake's dragon flames couldn't even open a gap. Moreover, even if it could open a gap, the spirit snake could pass through the sea of fire. However, with the high temperature of the dragon flames, it was impossible for me to pass through. My complexion instantly paled. Even though I'd already thought of dying, after escaping from such a great calamity, I would only cherish my life even more. I was currently so nervous that I found it hard to breathe. Not only me, but the spirit snake also stopped moving. It hovered in the air and didn't say a word. It was clear that it had no way to deal with the ghost generals surrounding it. In the endless silence, I couldn't even hear the footsteps of the Grim Reaper. I could only feel an endless shadow covering my head. This feeling was extremely unbearable. I didn't know how much time had passed, but when the ghost generals were within my sight, the spirit snake suddenly swung its tail and dashed toward the ghost generals in front of us. I was startled and asked, "What are you doing?" While the spirit snake was dashing, it had time to answer me. It asked me calmly, "They have surrounded us. We can't run away. Besides fighting with our lives, do you have any other way?" He was right. I didn't have any other way. I was desperate. There were so many ghost generals, and each of them had the power of a young god celestial master. Even if I risked my life, I wouldn't be able to kill many of them. However, the spirit snake's attitude was too calm. Even at this moment, its voice was extremely steady. I couldn't hear any fear in it. It was true that the spirit snake was also a Yin soul, so it was possible that the ghost generals wouldn't attack him. However, his behavior was extremely strange compared to before. I didn't have time to think about these things. Shortly after, the spirit snake directly bumped into the group of ghost generals. As soon as he touched them, he spat out a mouthful of dragon flame. Then, he didn't care about the result. He swung his tail and changed his direction to attack the other ghost generals. I glanced at him. This time, the ghost generals seemed to be prepared for his dragon flame. When he spat out the dragon flame, the carriages were pushed away. The ghost generals next to him also moved away. The dragon flame only affected 2 ghost generals. The others were all safe and sound. After the serpent spirit turned its head, the ghost generals around it immediately followed with their whips of yin qi, enveloping him from all directions. At this moment, I was still on his back. If the long whips came down, I would be the first one to get hurt. In a hurry, I didn't care about being afraid. The armor-dismantling sword in my hand flashed with true essence. Instantly, countless sword lights scattered and blocked the countless whips that were coming at me. Since I was in a dead end, I didn't hold back. I didn't care about the consumption of true essence. I used all of my cultivation base on the armor-dismantling sword. At this moment, each sword light that shot out was the strongest power that I could use with my current cultivation base. Perhaps it was the desperate situation that stimulated my power. I blocked all the whips that filled the sky. The spirit snake took advantage of this time to open its mouth and roar at a ghost general. Because of the dragon flame, the ghost general was scared. He instinctively wanted to run away. However, the spirit snake didn't spit out dragon flame. Instead, it swung its tail and rolled the ghost general up. Then, it threw him into its mouth. He had swallowed a ghost general in the Yang God realm. Chapter 695. The Jade Bracelet had the true dragon chi. When my true essence was drained, I could absorb the true dragon chi to replenish it. However, no matter how fast I could absorb the true dragon chi, it couldn't be faster than the whip in the ghost general's hand. After the spirit serpent had swallowed the ghost general, we were like fish on the chopping block, waiting to be slaughtered. However, while I was in a bad mood, the spirit serpent seemed to have taken some kind of medicine. It was extremely fierce. It didn't stop to think. After swallowing the ghost general, it swung its tail and dashed forward, attacking the countless ghost generals in front of us. I was amazed by its ferocity. However, at this moment, it didn't have any dragon flames left. Even if it could spurt out 10 dragon flames, it wouldn't be able to do anything while surrounded by so many ghost generals. Since I was riding on the spirit serpent's back, when it dashed forward, I followed it. Seeing the ghost generals in front of us raise their whips, I didn't have time to think. I had to do my best to fight until the last moment. I had used up all my true essence. At this moment, the only weapon I had that could be considered powerful was the Xian Yuan sword that I had nurtured for 1 month. The sword nurturing technique that Taoist Huang Zhu had given me was extraordinary. Moreover, I was nurturing the Xian Yuan sword. Once I succeeded in nurturing it, its power would be extremely formidable. At that time, I would be able to fight against Lu Jinyang or even those countless ghost generals. Unfortunately, 1 month wasn't enough for me to use the full power of the sword nurturing technique. I shook my head and didn't want to think about it anymore. I made a hand seal and opened my mouth. A 3-inch-long sword flew out of my dantian. It swelled in the wind, and by the time it landed in my hand, it was as big as before. The Xian Yuan sword had a golden body. As I held the hilt, I felt hot air rolling around it. It was as if the 5-clawed golden dragon on the hilt had come to life. The meridians on the hilt shivered, and a majestic aura shrouded my body. Ever since Nangong gifted me the sword, this is the first time I've truly wielded the Xian Yuan sword against an enemy. Regardless of how powerful it is, it doesn't seem to be a loss for me to die here with this sword. Since the spirit snake was so brave, I couldn't be too cowardly. I laughed. I didn't know if it was the spirit snake or the Xian Yuan sword that gave me the courage. I swung my sword and slashed at the army of ghost generals in front of me. After nurturing it for a month, there was an enormous power flowing within the Xian Yuan sword. Following my movements, a bright yellow sword light shot out from the body of the sword into the air. It extended over 10 meters and fiercely shot out with great force. The sword light was so fast that it disappeared in just a blink of an eye. Right after that, the carriage in front of me was cut in half. The 4 spear horses that were pulling the carriage and the ghost general were also cut in half. They fell to the left and right. However, the sword radiance's power did not diminish. It continued to charge forward and destroyed the 2nd and 3rd carriage. Only then did it slowly dissipate into the grayish-black ghost army. Seeing this result, I was overjoyed. I didn't expect the Xian Yuan sword to be so powerful. It had only been nurtured for a month. If it could be nurtured for half a year, or even many years, what kind of power would the Xian Yuan sword have? I didn't dare to imagine it. However, I was afraid that this sword was the ultimate move. After using it, I didn't have the power to resist or protect myself when facing so many ghost generals. The spirit snake was startled and halted for a while. However, when I retrieved my sword, he fearlessly stormed forward again. I put the Xian Yuan sword away and placed it on the back of the spirit snake. I didn't do anything else and just watched the spirit snake continue to fight. I didn't even lift my head to look at the sky. I didn't care if the ghost general's whip was coming or not. I just quietly watched the spirit snake. Although he didn't have his dragon flames anymore, he was still fast. He stormed forward and roared at the ghost general in front of him. This time, the ghost general wasn't scared by his bluff. He didn't retreat and just stood there, not moving an inch. I forced a smile. The ghost general wasn't stupid. Since he had used the spirit snake's attack once, he wouldn't be able to use it again. Just as I was thinking this, I saw an inconceivable scene. This time, the spirit snake opened his mouth wide. Not only did he roar, but he also stretched his neck forward and bit the ghost general on the carriage, swallowing him in one bite. As for the ghost general, it was as if he had been immobilized. He stood there stiffly, allowing the snake spirit to do whatever it wanted. I was shocked and didn't know what was going on. After the spirit snake swallowed the ghost general, he stopped in midair. His big eyes showed that he was as puzzled as I was. However, the serpent spirit, whose temperament had changed greatly, was extremely ferocious. After a brief moment of hesitation, it pounced forward again and continued to move forward. It opened its big mouth and bit at the next carriage. It was the same as the previous ghost general. The spirit snake pounced on the ghost general, but the ghost general didn't seem to see it. He just sat in the carriage and didn't move an inch. The result wasn't surprising. The spirit snake swallowed the ghost general one more time. This time, the spirit snake didn't hesitate for a long time. He became excited and roared. Before he could finish swallowing the ghost general, he jumped on the next ghost general. Just like that, the spirit snake moved forward. After swallowing around 10 ghost generals, I recovered from my daze. I looked at the endless army of ghost generals in the sky and sank into my thoughts. What happened to those ghost generals? Why did it feel like the electricity had been cut off? Were they not strong enough? Impossible. This place was the ancient battlefield where the Yellow Emperor had fought against Qi Yu. The air was filled with thick Yin energy, and their auras were extremely thick. Even at this moment, I didn't need to use my insight power to feel their intimidating auras. Was there someone hiding in the dark? Or was there something ordering them? For example, will you? It seemed possible. However, after thinking for a while, I shook my head. If they obeyed the order and didn't kill us, it would be more reasonable for them to retreat instead of standing here in a daze. From the current situation, it was possible that they were restrained by some power. This power was so strong that they couldn't resist. They could only stay where they were, waiting to be punished. I took a deep breath and used the wisp of Tao energy I had just recovered to use my insight power to check around. With the support of my insight power, my eyes could see far away. I could also sense some subtle auras. I could even vaguely see that Tong was still using his heavenly lightning. However, no matter how he looked, he still couldn't find anything, or rather, any power, that could cause such a great shock to the Ghost General. What was it? Those Ghost Generals were the condensation of Yin energy in the ancient battlefield. They were born with the instinct to kill. What kind of power could stop them from killing? Wait a minute. The ancient battlefield. I suddenly had an idea. This ancient battlefield was left behind when the Yellow Emperor had fought against Qi Yu. The Xianyuan sword in my hand was the Yellow Emperor's sword. According to common sense, the ghosts that died here were either the Yellow Emperor's subordinates or Qi Yu's subordinates. Back then, the Yellow Emperor wielded the Xianyuan sword to conquer the world. He was invincible. Although I hadn't seen the Yellow Emperor's power, I guessed that most of the ghosts that died in the Battle of Zhuolu were Qi Yu's subordinates. Many of them were killed by the Xianyuan sword. In the eyes of those ghosts, the Xianyuan sword was like a death talisman. Even if thousands of years had passed, it was possible that they would be frightened when they saw the Xianyuan sword again. After understanding this, I lowered my head to look at the Xianyuan sword in my hand. I felt lucky and frightened at the same time. Just how peerlessly ferocious was the Xianyuan sword all those years ago that these ghost generals who had already turned into phantoms still didn't dare to move when they met again. On the other hand, exactly how invincible would the Xianyuan clan that held this sword be when it descended to the world? While I was thinking about these questions, the serpent spirit didn't stop moving. It kept moving forward, opening its big mouth. I didn't know how many ghost generals had been swallowed into its stomach. At first, I remember the numbers. Later on, there were so many that I couldn't remember them all. I couldn't help but worry. Chapter 696. While I was worried about the snake spirit, I was also worried about Tong Tong and the fatty. There were too many ghosts here. Although we had lured the ghost generals here, we couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't send a part of them to deal with Tong Tong and the others. Thanks to the Xianyuan sword, the danger in front of us had been resolved. I wanted to go and meet the fatty, but the snake spirit seemed to have gone crazy. It swallowed the ghost generals one by one and didn't seem to want to stop. I thought about leaving him here and going to find the fatty. However, I was worried that after I left, the Xianyuan sword would no longer be there. The ghost generals would rebel again. After thinking for a while, I decided to use the sound transmitting talisman to send a message to the fatty. What's the situation over there? Of course, it would be more convenient to use the sound transmitting talisman to contact Tong Tong. However, when I passed by, Tong Tong was busy dealing with the ghost generals. If I rashly asked her, I could distract her. To be safe, I decided to contact the fatty first. After I sent the message, the fatty didn't reply immediately. I became more worried. However, around 1 minute later, the sound transmitting talisman vibrated. The fatty finally replied. He told me that their situation wasn't bad. Although 2 ghost generals had gone there, he had used the time when Tong Tong was dealing with the ghost generals alone to arrange several formations. Then, he and Tong Tong lured the ghost generals into the formations. They used the power of the formations to trap the ghost generals inside. Although the 2 of them were wounded, they weren't serious. After reading the message, I felt relieved. I thought for a while and sent a message to the fatty. I asked him and Tong Tong to come to our location. We should meet first. At this moment, we were still surrounded by the ghost generals. The snake spirit had been swallowing them for a long time, but the ghost generals hadn't moved. It was enough to confirm the situation. As long as we had the Xianyuan sword, we would be safe. After notifying the fatty and Tong Tong, I felt much more relaxed. We had encountered danger. Now, we needed to think about how to get out of here. Because of the Xinyuan sword, our situation was completely different. We didn't need to hurry to use the sky-measuring ruler. After we met, we should find the exit first. The sky-measuring ruler could only be our last resort. Apart from the problem of retreating, the only thing that gave me a headache was the snake's spirit. While I was communicating with the fatty, he continued his great devouring. The ghost generals that had surrounded us had been eaten, and a tunnel had been created. The two of us had passed through the encirclement and arrived outside. He had thought that it was time for him to stop, but he seemed to have thought it through. With a flick of his tail, he turned around and charged towards the army of ghost generals. Tong Tong and the fatty would be here soon. I had to go and greet them. I jumped off the snake spirit's back and landed on the ground outside the ghost general's encirclement. Since all the dangers were out of my way, I didn't have any scruples. I sent a message to Tong Tong, communicating with him along the way. Finally, after 10 minutes or so, the two of us appeared not far away. The ghosts on this ancient battlefield didn't have a mind of their own. Since I had the ghost generals with me, they didn't dare to act rashly. However, Tong Tong and the fatty were hurrying over. Along the way, there were ghosts blocking their way. When they appeared in my sight, the two of them were struggling to move forward. I hurried to fly over. The time I'd spent waiting was enough for me to use the jade bracelet to recover half of the true essence in my body. When I arrived, I swung the armor-removing sword one more time, clearing a large number of ghosts in front of me. It hadn't been a long time since we had entered this place. However, after reuniting, the fatty, Tong Tong, and I felt as if we hadn't seen each other for a long time. Our eyes were filled with excitement. Of course, this excitement didn't last long. Tong Tong and the fatty noticed the endless army of ghosts in front of them. Their faces changed. They pulled me and wanted to run back. I hurried to stop them and told them what had happened, as well as my guess. The fatty and Tong Tong couldn't believe it, especially Tong Tong. When he heard that the snake spirit had swallowed countless ghost generals, he dropped his jaw, his face dumbstruck. After they had digested the information, I was still worried about the snake spirit. I urged them to go with me to clear the souls in front of us. We rushed to the army of the ghost generals. I peeked through the tunnel where the snake spirit had just eaten, but I didn't see the snake spirit. I thought for a while and decided to enter the tunnel to find the snake spirit. Tong Tong and the fatty looked at the countless ghost generals in front of them, their faces still filled with fear. However, after I assured them again and again, they chose to trust me. They followed me and entered the tunnel. We hurriedly moved forward. After a while, we returned to the place where we had been surrounded. Only then did we realize that the spirit snake had returned. Moreover, it had stopped swallowing the ghost general and was floating motionlessly in the air. Brother, this little snake looks a little strange. Tong Tong suddenly raised her hand and pointed at the snake spirit's head. I looked in the direction of her finger. The snake spirit's huge head didn't show any abnormal expression, but its eyelids were opening and closing. Following this movement, its eyes would occasionally emit a golden light. It looked strange, but it also carried an indescribable aura. I judged and said to Tong Tong, "Don't worry. He just swallowed a lot of ghost generals. I think he's about to break through. It's not a bad thing." Tong Tong heaved a sigh of relief after hearing what I said. However, he still looked at the snake spirit with worry in his eyes. Although she liked to lecture the snake spirit, they had a good relationship. Tong Tong's concern for the snake spirit wasn't less than mine. I wasn't worried. The snake spirit had swallowed so many ghost generals. If his cultivation base hadn't increased, I would have found it strange. His current situation made sense. However, we had to wait for him to finish his breakthrough before we could search for the exit of this place. If the snake spirit needed a short time to break through, it wouldn't be a problem. However, if he needed a long time, no one knew if something unexpected would happen in this strange place. I thought for a while and put this worry aside. I told the fatty about my previous plan. The fatty didn't have any objection. He knew the heavenly measuring ruler situation better than I did. It was possible that it would lose its effect after one use. Moreover, he wanted to study the heavenly measuring ruler's power to increase his understanding of formations. He didn't want to use it right now. I asked the fatty and Tong Tong to sit next to me since we didn't have anything else to do. The three of us seized the time to recover our true essence and treat our wounds. Tong Tong cultivated yin qi. In this ancient battlefield, she could easily absorb the dense yin qi in the surroundings and quickly recover her cultivation. The fatty wasn't so lucky. The thick yin energy around wasn't suitable for him to cultivate. However, after I gave him the jade bracelet, he used the true dragon energy inside to recover his cultivation base. As for me, I had recovered half of my true essence. After the fatty was done, I took the jade bracelet and absorbed the energy for a while. My true essence was fully recovered. After the three of us adjusted our condition, we prepared to discuss the matter of the snake spirit. However, at this moment, the snake spirit, which had been sleeping for a long time, suddenly opened its eyes and let out a resonant dragon roar. Right after that, his body swelled as though he was being inflated. Hearing the commotion, we didn't have time to discuss further and turned to look at the spirit snake. I had seen his body grow bigger once in the feng shui metaphysics shop, so I wasn't surprised. However, the crazy growth seemed to bring him endless pain. After a dragon's roar, it was followed by a continuous howl of pain. As he howled, his body kept rolling around. It was obvious that he was in extreme pain. Tong Tong and I became tense. However, no matter how worried we were, we couldn't do anything to help the snake spirit. We could only watch him roll around in pain. Fortunately, the painful wails did not last for too long. After about a quarter of an hour, the serpent spirit stopped rolling and wailing. Instead, it suddenly arched its body and raised its head, as if it was looking at the heavens. It suddenly opened its mouth and let out another resounding dragon roar. This time, the voice was several times louder than before. It was like a great bell exploding in my ears. It carried a sense of majesty that made people who heard it feel a sense of subservience. Chapter 697. Since the serpent spirit leaped over the dragon gate and transformed into a flood dragon at the Yi River, he had been very focused on cultivation and wouldn't show himself easily. However, every time he appeared, he would always mention two words: dragon transformation. I heard from the serpent spirit that dragon transformation corresponds to the heavenly master realm of human cultivators, and the real dragon transformation corresponds to the cloud soaring realm. Previously, the serpent spirit was at the late stage of the seal realm, so this time, the serpent spirit would at most reach the yang spirit realm. However, I was shocked when I saw the great momentum in front of me. The serpent spirit was wrapped in red flames. From afar, he looked like a divine dragon bathing in the sun. If I didn't know the serpent spirit's current realm, I would have thought that he was undergoing the real process of dragon transformation. The red flames provided sufficient light for the surroundings. Even without using the power of absolute sight, I could clearly see the countless black scales on the spirit snake's huge body that were being roasted by the raging flames. They opened up one by one, and the edges of the scales seemed to have been burnt. They were dyed in a golden red color, causing the originally dark black body to look extremely majestic. The serpent spirit's breakthrough this time was completely different from the last time when he transformed into a flood dragon. That was why I couldn't find any trace of it. I didn't know what kind of transformation it had undergone to be considered a success or a failure. However, looking at the serpent spirit that had suddenly become extraordinarily majestic, I was vaguely sure that the transformation in front of me wasn't a bad thing. The only doubt I had was that although the serpent spirit had transformed into a flood dragon, its original body was still a yin soul. At this time, the yang energy in the red flames was extremely dense. I didn't know if it would harm its body. Just as I was worrying, the snake's spirit in the raging flames suddenly let out a resounding dragon roar. Soon after, The body of the snake's spirit in the raging flames violently trembled, as though it wanted to break free from the restraints of the raging flames and escape. It trembled greatly, but the flames seemed to have sealing power. As it moved, the surrounding shape constantly changed, but it didn't seem like it was going to break free. Looking at its movements, I didn't understand why the serpent spirit wanted to break free from the flames. The red flames were like a chick breaking out of its shell or a moth breaking out of its cocoon. After pondering for a while, I suddenly realized that it was like a chick breaking out of its shell or a moth breaking out of its cocoon. At this moment, the red flames were like an eggshell or a cocoon wrapping around the spirit serpent. Although it had come from its body, it had become something that bound it. It was very likely that the serpent spirit had already completed its breakthrough and was only waiting for it to break out of its shell. After understanding this, I felt worried for the snake spirit. I hoped that he could succeed and wouldn't have to suffer too much. However, things didn't progress as smoothly as I had expected. The spirit snake trembled several times, but no matter how big its movements were, the outer layer of flames was like a tight shirt on its body. It was extremely elastic and would only change shape with its movements, but there was no possibility of it tearing. Gradually, I understood that the raging flames were incorporeal, just like gas. They were scattered between heaven and earth and could transform into an infinite number of shapes. How was it possible for the spirit snake to struggle free from them? The serpent spirit tried to break free 7 times. Each time, it struggled crazily. However, the result was the same. It was still trapped inside the fireball. The flames around it seemed to burn more vigorously because of its movements. I was worried. I wanted to help it, but I didn't know what to do. I could only pray for it. At this moment, it started to struggle for the 8th time. It was still the same violent trembling. However, this time, I could feel that it didn't struggle as crazily as before. I was worried. Is the serpent spirit exhausted? It shouldn't be. It had swallowed a lot of ghost generals. Even if it couldn't digest all of them, it should have digested a part of them. It should be the time when its power was at its peak. How could it be exhausted after just a short time? While I was worried, the serpent spirit roared again. Its body shook for the 9th time. This time, it was different from the previous 8 times. It wasn't just one time. Its body continued to struggle crazily. It was as if it was hitting a leather drum with a drumstick. Each time, it exerted more force than the last. It seemed it would never stop. I finally understood that the serpent spirit wasn't exhausted. It was accumulating power. This 9th attack would be the moment it would erupt with its full power. As the serpent spirit continued to shake, the flames outside the fireball began to dance. Gradually, sparks began to scatter around the fireball, falling from the sky. It looked like a meteor shower. The entire scene was dazzling and solemn, as if it was some kind of ritual. The fireball shook harder and harder. The serpent spirit inside seemed to have endless power. It didn't seem to want to stop. Tong Tong, the fatty, and I gazed at the fireball. As we were worried about it, our breathing seemed to follow the rhythm of the fireball shaking. Eventually, the serpent spirit stopped after the fireball had shaken many times. I didn't have time to worry as I heard a crisp sound. It was the sound of an egg breaking its shell. It came from the fireball. It was obvious that the fireball had broken. A crack appeared on the scorching fireball. The serpent spirit had completely stopped moving, but the crack continued to expand. Shortly after, the fireball swelled. There was a loud explosion, and countless flames shot up to the sky. The serpent spirit's body was completely submerged in the flames. I couldn't see the serpent spirit's traces. I couldn't help but feel anxious. In a hurry, I used my clear sight power to look at the soaring flames. The clear sight power had the power to see through illusions. It had always been successful, but today it had hit a wall in the flames. I used my clear sight power to look at the flames. I felt a scorching heat wave rolling toward me. I couldn't even open my eyes, let alone the serpent spirit. I couldn't even see the soaring flames in front of me. I hastily retracted my insight power, and the scorching heat wave finally dissipated. My eyes could finally see the flames from before. However, at this moment, The soaring flames outlined an extremely huge shadow in the sky, almost completely enveloping the entire sky. The phantom wasn't really bright in the flames, but I could still see it clearly. It was a giant creature. It had a pair of wings on its back, a scaly body with a spine, a big and long head, a sharp mouth, a small nose, big eyes, high eyebrows, a protruding forehead, and a long tail. This phantom was like a god traveling the world. It hovered in the sky. Inglong. These two words popped up in my head. In the classic of mountains and seas and other ancient books, there were many records about Inglong. It was said that in ancient times, when a yellow emperor had fought against Chiyu, he had borrowed the power of Inglong to kill Chiyu and Quafu. In the era of Yu the Great, when the flood reached the sky, people were plunged into misery and suffering. Inglong had swept the ground with his tail to guide the flood. In the legends, Inglong had the power to swallow the sky and destroy the earth. He could move mountains and fill the sea. Chiyu was a powerful expert, but he had died in the hands of Inglong. From this, one could see how powerful Inglong was in ancient times. However, why would such a powerful ancient divine beast appear here and now? This place was the ancient battlefield where the Yellow Emperor had fought against Chiyu. Inglong had killed Chiyu in this ancient battlefield. Could it be that the serpent spirit's breakthrough had stimulated the remnant, Inglong's will? I made a wild guess in my head. Then, I lowered my head to look. At this moment, the flames in the sky had weakened a little, but the serpent spirit hadn't appeared yet. When the fireworks completely fell, there was a violent sound of something tearing through the air. Immediately afterward, the snake spirit's figure emerged from the remnants of the fireworks and suddenly flew into the air. His body was still the same as before, but the countless scales on his body were all plated with a layer of gold. After leaping into the air, he floated in midair, raised his huge head vertically, and let out a long, angry roar towards the boundless night sky. As he moved, the Inglong's phantom that had shrouded the entire world lifted its head and roared at the sky. Chapter 698. As soon as the hissing stopped, the strange phenomena in the sky disappeared. The serpent spirit fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Tong Tong, the fatty, and I had been frightened by the winged dragon's phantom. Now, we finally got a hold of ourselves. We didn't have time to think about anything else, and ran toward the place where the serpent spirit had fallen. When I got close to it, I took a closer look. The serpent spirit's eyes were closed, and it didn't react at all. However, I checked its huge body. Besides the golden edges on its scales and the dragon horns on its head, there weren't many changes. It didn't have any wounds. Tong Tong was a little worried. "Brother, will the serpent be okay?" The strange phenomena in the sky didn't seem to be harmful to the serpent spirit. Although I didn't know why the serpent spirit was unconscious, I nodded affirmatively. "Don't worry. This fellow has just broken through. I think he needs some time to adapt to the power in his body. He will wake up soon." Tong Tong always believed in my words. He nodded, and the worry on his face faded a little. The danger was temporarily gone, and the serpent spirit was okay. I sat cross-legged and discussed our next plan with the fatty. According to my plan, we should explore this ancient battlefield and try to find the exit. However, the serpent spirit was unconscious, so it couldn't go with us. Moreover, this place was really dangerous. We couldn't just sit here and wait. I wanted to split up. I would ask the fatty and Tong Tong to stay here to accompany the serpent spirit, while I would explore the surrounding area. However, there were still many ghost generals in this place. If I took the Xian Yuan sword with me, who knew what would happen? However, if I didn't bring the Xian Yuan sword, I couldn't guarantee my safety. This ancient battlefield was really big, and it was hard to say if there were ghost generals in other places. This plan wouldn't work. However, after hearing our discussion, Tong Tong came to me and said, "Brother, you can't go, but Tong Tong can." Tong Tong was also a ghost, so she wouldn't be attacked by the ghosts here. Without the Xian Yuan sword, she could ensure her safety. I had already thought of this, but in this dangerous environment, I couldn't guarantee that there were no other things that could harm Tong Tong, so I didn't want her to go, so I didn't bring it up. Hearing Tong Tong's request, I instinctively rejected him. However, Tong Tong was firm. He pestered me for a long time. In the end, I reluctantly agreed. After instructing her not to go too far, Tong Tong smiled at me before she stood up and left. The fatty and I stayed behind to wait for the snake spirit to wake up. Just now, I told Tong Tong that the spirit snake wouldn't sleep for too long, but in fact, I wasn't very sure. Fortunately, my guess was correct. About half an hour after Tong Tong left, the snake spirit's huge body suddenly shook and it raised its head. The fatty and I had been watching him. As soon as he moved, we immediately noticed him. We quickly got up and went to the snake spirit. How is he? The snake spirit had just woken up, and its two big eyes looked confused. After we had asked it for a long time, it seemed to react. It didn't answer our questions, but asked, "Where is this place? Why am I here?" His question bewildered me. I looked at his face, and he didn't look like he was joking. I then told him what had happened before he had fainted. When I told him about the battle with the ghost general, the snake spirit looked pained. He shook his head and said to me, "I only remember that we fought with the ghost general. I don't remember anything else. Did the ghost general hurt me? Is that why my body is in so much pain?" I thought that the snake spirit had used up a lot of his energy to break through, so he had temporarily forgotten what had happened. I thought that he would wake up after I reminded him. I didn't expect that he would only remember part of it, but the rest was a blur. How could that be? I was puzzled, so I asked about the snake spirit situation. Then, I slowly found a clue. Thinking about it carefully, the snake spirit seemed to have suddenly become different after fighting with the ghost general, and his memory at this time just happened to stop at this time. There must be something wrong. After pondering for a while, I told the snake spirit what had happened after we had met the ghost general. The snake spirit was still confused. When I told him that he had swallowed countless ghost generals and his power had increased, he cheered up. The pained expression on his face lessened, and he looked at me with bright eyes. When I told him that the moment he broke through, the image of a dragon appeared in the sky. The snake spirit screamed and jumped up from the ground. His eyes opened wide, and he asked me in disbelief, "What did you say? A dragon? Is that true?" Then, he didn't wait for me to confirm and laughed. His face was excited. "Haha, dragon. I can control a dragon. Haha, that's awesome. Does it mean that when I transform into a dragon, I will directly turn into a dragon?" I didn't know if he would turn into a dragon or not, but his current expression and movements were different from when he had fainted. He had returned to his normal appearance. Hesitating for a while, I asked the snake spirit, "Do you know what's going on?" The snake spirit shook his head. "This kind of thing has never happened before. How could I know? Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about the dragon you just saw. Didn't he look mighty and different from the others? Look at me now. Don't I already look like a dragon?" As he spoke, he changed the topic and began to brag about himself. I frowned and felt strange. It wasn't that I didn't believe the snake spirit, but I felt that things weren't that simple. Since I couldn't get anything from the snake spirit, I had to give up on this matter. I sent a message to Tong Tong, asking her to stop exploring and come back to meet us. Then, we would search for the exit together. After I notified Tong Tong, she quickly sent me a message. However, she sounded a little panicked. She said to me quickly, "Brother, you guys should leave this place. Run in the direction I just went. Hurry." My heart shivered. What happened? Tong Tong's voice came again, but this time it was intermittent. "There's a lot of Yin energy. I don't know what to say. I'm going back now. Brother, you guys should go. In this strange, ancient battlefield, anything could happen." I hadn't let my guard down. However, I hadn't expected that something would happen so soon. Moreover, Tong Tong had been affected. She asked me to go first, but I couldn't abandon her and run away alone. I was worried and wanted to ask Tong Tong again. The fat man saw that my face wasn't right. "What's wrong?" At this moment, my mind was in a mess. Of course, I didn't hide anything and told him what Tong Tong had told me. The fat man was also worried. He shouted, "I want to find Tong Tong and protect her." Even the snake spirit, who was fantasizing about turning into a dragon, woke up. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws, urging me to leave immediately. I gritted my teeth and took the fat man and the snake's spirit in the direction Tong Tong had gone. We hadn't even walked 1 kilometer when we heard a loud whistling sound in front of us. Before we could figure out what was happening, the snake's spirit screamed, "Look! What's that?" I lifted my head to look in front of me and saw that not far from us, there was a large amount of gray fog that covered the sky and covered the earth, rapidly charging towards us. It constantly rolled and stacked on top of each other, as though it was creating a tsunami. The whistling sound of the wind was accompanied by an imposing aura that was extremely terrifying. I didn't need to think to know that the combined power of the fat man, the snake's spirit, and I wouldn't be enough to deal with this kind of earth-shattering power. Moreover, this gray mist tsunami was really fast. If we didn't turn around and run away, I was afraid we would be swallowed by it. However, if we ran away, what would happen to Tong Tong? Fortunately, I saw Tong Tong at this moment. She was right in front of the tsunami, rushing towards us at full speed. Seeing that Tong Tong was safe, I didn't care about anything else. When Tong Tong reached us, I shouted at the snake spirit, "Run!" Then I pulled Tong Tong and the fat man, jumping on the snake spirit's back. Chapter 699. The spirit snake was very fast. Under the full activation of the cloud controlling technique, its speed was much faster than the fog tsunami. In just a short moment, we had distanced ourselves from it and hid far away from it. Just as I heaved a sigh of relief, the snake's spirit anxiously told me that he was exhausted and couldn't run at full speed anymore. Then, I remembered that the snake's spirit had just broken through. During the process of breaking through, he had used up almost all of his energy to break the fireball. He had fainted because of his exhaustion. I was afraid that he had reached his limit by bringing us with him for such a long distance. I turned to look behind me. The gray mist tsunami was still far away from us, so I couldn't see its imposing manner. However, I could still see that the gray mist was covering the sky and forming a horizon in the distance. If we didn't continue to run, we would have nowhere to run when the tsunami came. What should I do? I didn't have much time to think, so I had to make the last resort. I let the snake spirit and Tong Tong return to my body to recover their cultivation, while the fatty and I relied on our own power to run forward. Without the snake spirit's cloud-controlling technique, the fatty and I slowed down a lot. The safe distance that the snake spirit had gained by rushing with all its might had been squandered by us in just a short while. There was a loud rumbling sound from afar. I turned to look and saw that the fog tsunami was not far behind us. The fatty spoke first. He panted and said to me, "Third baby, I can't use the heaven measuring ruler now. If it catches up to us, I'm afraid we won't have time to activate it." What he said made sense. Just as I was about to agree, a voice came from not far away. "Mr. Zhou, Mr. Lin, please follow me." The fatty and I were shocked. We lifted our heads and saw Wu Yu standing not far from us. She was still wearing her original clothes, which looked simple and elegant. Her long black hair was tied into a simple bun at the back of her head. She was waving at me anxiously. When I saw her, I couldn't help but get angry. She was the one who had sent the fatty and me to this ancient battlefield. She had put us in such a difficult situation, and she was standing here unscathed. At this moment, I was very suspicious of her. I didn't want to go to her, but then she said anxiously, "I'll bring you to a safe place." The earth-shattering tsunami of gray fog had almost drowned the entire world. Where's there a safe place? I didn't want to believe her, but there didn't seem to be any better choice. After hesitating for a moment, I flew towards her. When the two of us arrived, Wu Yue didn't dare to stay any longer. He immediately turned around and brought the two of us in another direction. She was obviously very familiar with this place. She led us through many twists and turns, and after a while, we came to a flat area. After arriving here, her footsteps suddenly slowed down, as if she did not care about the gray fog tsunami behind her at all. The fat guy and I didn't understand what she was doing. We reminded her that the tsunami was close. Wu Yu smiled and said calmly, "On this ancient battlefield, the Yin tide rises and dies every day. Every time the tide rises, it will cover the entire area. Those ghosts and spirits are all destroyed by the power of the Yin tide. And when the Yin tide falls, they will be reborn and the cycle will repeat. With that, she raised her head and looked at the tsunami that was about to drown them. She lifted her foot and stepped on a pile of white bones. She continued, "Under this Yin Chi tide, there is only one place in the entire ancient battlefield that can hide, and that is here. You two, take 2 steps forward and stand with me." The fat guy and I were so anxious that we were about to use the sky measuring ruler. We hurried to step on the pile of white bones. It wasn't that I trusted Wu Yue, but she was also standing here. If she lied to me, she would have to bear the impact of the gray fog tsunami. Although she had the body of a ghost, the terrifying tsunami had swallowed many ghosts and spirits along the way. It wouldn't just target us. As soon as we got there, the gray mist tsunami surged behind us. Perhaps it was because it had swallowed a lot of ghosts and spirits along the way. But now, the gray mist had turned as black as ink. It rolled and stormed toward us. My face turned pale. Although I knew Will wouldn't lie to us, I couldn't help but feel nervous as I stood there and watched the terrifying tsunami. However, the tsunami didn't give me much time. Soon it began to fall. Right at this moment, the white bones under our feet suddenly moved. It was as if they were being urged by some force. The white bones floated up and released white smoke. In just a blink of an eye, they shrouded us. I recognized that the white bones under our feet were all ox skulls. They were exactly the same as the Kuei ox altar that we had come from. Wu Yue had also built a Kuei ox altar in this ancient battlefield. The massive tsunami covered the sky and covered the earth. However, when it met the white smoke that the Kuei ox altar had released, it didn't smash the white smoke. Instead, it seemed to have met its natural enemy. It slid past the white smoke from both sides. It couldn't even get within 10 meters of the white smoke. Seeing this, I let out a sigh of relief. I was finally out of danger. With lingering fear, the fatty and I stood in the middle of the Kuei ox altar in silence. After the Yin Chi tide had passed, I turned my head and stared at Wu Yue. When we were in the Saint Mother Temple, you said that you didn't have any hostility toward us. Why did you use the excuse of bringing us to see something to deceive us and bring us here? I asked her coldly. Wu Yue was bewildered. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, "I didn't deceive you. I really wanted to bring you here to see something. However, I forgot to tell you about the Yin Chi tide. After we came in, I searched everywhere. Finally, I found you before the Yin Chi tide broke out. It was my mistake. I'm really sorry." I frowned, but my face didn't change for the better. I continued to question her. "Forget about the Yin Chi tide, but what about those ghosts? What about those ghost generals? Those ghost generals driving the carriages all have the strength of a young god, celestial master. If we hadn't resisted with our lives, I'm afraid we would have entered the ghost general's stomach before you found us." Hearing my question, Wu Yue looked surprised. After a moment of silence, she said in confusion, "Those ghost generals are really strong, and there are a lot of them. However, Mr. Zhou, you have the Xian Yuan sword. As long as you take out the Xian Yuan sword, the ghosts here won't dare to get close to you. How could there be danger? No, you don't know the use of a Xian Yuan sword?" This time, it was my turn to be surprised. From Wu Yue's words, she knew that I had the Xian Yuan sword and thought that I was fine. After looking at each other, Wu Yue spoke first. "This is Wu Yue's negligence. I thought that since Mr. Zhou has the Xian Yuan sword, you must know its use. I didn't expect to bring you so much trouble. I'm really sorry." She apologized again, and her attitude was very sincere. I was dumbfounded. I hadn't expected things to turn out like this. However, when she mentioned the Xian Yuan sword, I thought of the doubt in my heart. I simply waved my hand at her. "Since it's a misunderstanding, forget it. Anyway, it didn't cause any serious consequences. However, I haven't understood how Senior knew our identities and how you knew that I carried the Xian Yuan sword. I hope Senior can tell me. Ever since I met this mysterious Wu Yue, I seem to have no secrets in front of her. After enduring for so long, I finally couldn't hold it in anymore. I simply said it out loud and asked directly. Wu Yue looked at me and didn't answer. Instead, she smiled mysteriously and said, "This question is also related to the thing I showed you. There's no need for me to answer. When you see that thing, you will naturally know." Hearing this answer, I furrowed my eyebrows even tighter. Previously, she said that she would show us something, and then we would leave this place. Now, she said that she knew our background, and it was also related to that thing. I thought about it, but I couldn't think of anything that could link the two. Chapter 700. While we were talking, the tide of energy finally stopped, and we saw the vast wilderness again. The ghosts and ghost generals that had been everywhere had disappeared with the tide of energy. Now, only white bones were left on the ground. At this moment, the ox skull that was floating around us and spewing white smoke fell again, returning to the original appearance of the one-legged ox altar. Since the danger had disappeared, Wu Yu didn't delay any longer. She pointed forward and smiled at me. "Mr. Zhou, please follow me." Then, she led the way and flew toward a certain place. The fatty and I exchanged looks. We didn't say anything and followed Wu Yu. The place she wanted to go seemed to be a little far. After walking for a while, I was worried about the snake spirit situation, so I summoned it to see how it had recovered. I didn't expect that the exhausted spirit serpent would recover in just a few minutes. However, it couldn't change its cowardly appearance. As soon as it got out, it looked around with a panicked face. After confirming that there was no energy around, it heaved a sigh of relief. "How did you avoid the energy tide?" Before I could answer, Tong Tong felt the movement outside. She jumped out and looked at me with a worried face. After confirming that I was okay, she also heaved a sigh of relief like the snake spirit. Then, she asked me about the situation. I smiled and rubbed Tong Tong's hair. Then, I turned around and pointed at Wu Yu. I told her what had happened. When Tong Tong heard that it was Wu Yu who had saved me, she quickly thanked him. Wu Yu turned around and looked at the snake spirit and Tong Tong. She smiled at me and asked, "They should be the snake spirit and the heavenly embryo with Mr. Zhou, right?" She knew my situation like the back of her hand. It wasn't strange that she knew about Tong Tong and the snake spirit. I nodded and didn't pay much attention to her. "How's the snake spirit recovering?" The snake spirit raised its head and said proudly, "I swallowed at least 5,000 or 6,000 ghosts. More than half of them are still in my stomach. Although I can't directly convert them into my cultivation base, when the energy in my body is exhausted, I can quickly replenish it. In the future, I'll be an unkillable cockroach." So that was how it was. Previously, I thought it was strange that the serpent spirit had swallowed so many ghost generals. How could it consume them all? Now I understood. It was the same as when I had swallowed the ghost generals in the Corp sect. I had stored half of the ghost generals in my body. Before I could say anything, Wu Yue continued, "Those spirits are really good supplements, especially the ghost generals. Swallowing one is equivalent to 100 years of cultivation." Now that the tide of Shi had just passed, those ghosts had returned to nothingness. However, they would appear again in a few hours. Why don't we take a break first and wait for the spirits to appear so that you can devour more? She seemed to be a little apologetic and was trying to find a way to make it up to him. I clasped my hands at Wu Yue and refused on their behalf. "Senior, I appreciate your kindness, but the spirit snake has swallowed enough souls. Tong Tong is kind and doesn't want to do such a thing. So let's hurry up and get going." Wu Yue ignored me and looked at Tong Tong in confusion. "You don't want to swallow it? You little girl, you're very similar to me in the past." She seemed to remember something, and her gaze became heavy as she looked at Tong Tong and said, "This is a world where the strong preys on the weak. If you are strong, others will be afraid of you, and you will be able to protect the people you love. But if you are weak, not only will you not be able to protect the people you love, but you will also be bullied." I was like that in the past. I relied on the Taoist priest's protection. I could have cultivated, but I didn't. In the end, it was too late for regrets. Hearing her words, I had a strange look on my face. Wu Yue thought that Tong Tong and I were a couple. She even used their relationship as an analogy. I didn't know what to say. Tong Tong looked pensive after listening to her. Wu Yue looked at me and then at Tong Tong. She seemed to remember something and continued, "There are many rules in this world, but they were set by others. We don't have to follow them. Back then, the Taoist priest and I wanted to be together, so we got together. The people of Mount Longhu pointed at us, but we didn't care at all." Seeing that her words were becoming more and more explicit, I hastily interrupted her words and said, "What Senior said is extremely correct. Rules are dead, but people are alive. If we have to abide by rules in everything, then there would be no meaning in living." Wu Yue didn't understand my relationship with Tong Tong, and I didn't want to say anything in front of Tong Tong, so I simply followed her words and stopped her from talking. Hearing what I said, Wu Yue nodded in agreement. After thinking for a while, she suddenly took out a palm-sized square box and handed it to Tong Tong. She said to her, "Take this first. It's a small gift from me. You'll definitely need it in the future." Tong Tong wasn't familiar with Wu Yue. She took the box and was about to refuse, but Wu Yue had already turned around and set off again. I didn't know what was wrong with Wu Yue. Seeing that she finally didn't continue the topic, I asked Tong Tong to put away the box. Then we sat on the snake spirit and followed Wu Yue. After another hour, Wu Yue brought us to a wilderness that was no different from other places. She stopped and stood there, her hands forming a set of complicated hand seals. Then our vision blurred and the wilderness disappeared. What replaced it was a huge cave that appeared around us. It was different from the ancient battlefield that we had been in. Although this place was also very wide, it was extremely bright. It was a huge cave, but it gave people the feeling that they were in a temple, and they couldn't help but feel solemn. This cave was huge, almost as big as the palace I had seen in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum. Looking around, I saw that the smooth and steep stone walls had been painted with countless images of people and animals in bright colors. I lifted my head to look at the murals. They seemed to record the life of our ancestors. Most of the people inside were wearing animal skins. They were either hunting or gathering fruits and vegetables. It was a quiet and peaceful atmosphere. From the content, it was obvious that these murals were from a long time ago. On the surface, the colors were beautiful, but it looked as though they had just been painted. There were water stains on the paint, as though it hadn't been drained yet. As we followed Wu Yue forward, the walls on both sides of the road were filled with murals. However, the contents of the murals on both sides were obviously different. The murals on the left were like the first one I saw. They depicted a peaceful life. The murals on the right were in a completely dark style. There were all kinds of monsters that were grinding their teeth and drinking blood. One of them had a face like a bull's head and a pair of wings on its back. It occupied most of the space. Every time this giant appeared, it was accompanied by strange people with bronze heads and iron foreheads, 8 arms, and 9 toes. We walked to the end of the cave and turned a corner. The murals on the left and right suddenly gathered on the stone wall on the left. This gathering made the style of the murals on the left become bloody. The mural depicted the scene on the battlefield of the deer-chasing war. Chiyu, with a face like a bull's head and a pair of wings on his back, waved his Chiyu axe and galloped through the wilderness of Zhuolu. Every time the axe fell, countless warriors of the Yellow Emperor's tribe fell to the ground, blood flowing everywhere. On the other hand, the Yellow Emperor was holding the Xianyuan sword and fighting against Chiyo's subordinates, who had bronze heads, iron foreheads, 8 arms, and 9 toes. The whole scene was full of danger. Even though countless years had passed, the battlefield of that year was portrayed in the form of a mural. It was still immersive and nerve-wracking to watch. From beginning to end, these murals clearly recorded the entire process of the Zhuolu War. The entire painting stretched from the top of the cave to the end, spanning over 100 meters. I was curious. What kind of place did Wu Yue bring us to? Why would there be murals that recorded the entire Zhuolu War? As I was thinking about this question, I suddenly tripped over something and almost fell. I quickly lowered my head to take a look, and when I saw it clearly, I was stunned. The thing that tripped me on the ground was actually a person a person wearing an iron mask on his head. Chapter 701. In the past 2 days, I was first recognized by Wuyue and was then led to this ancient battlefield by her. I saw countless Een souls and ghost generals. I even saw the winged dragon phantom when the snake's spirit broke through. Every one of these things shocked me, but all the shock added together was not as great as seeing Lu Jinyang lying on the ground like a dead fish. In my memories, Lu Jinyang's cultivation could be described as heaven-defying. At the heavenly grand ritual, he had single-handedly brought the spiritual mountain grotto heaven to the top 10 grotto heavens. In the end, if it wasn't for this trip to Zhuolu, he might have even replaced Wangwu grotto heaven and become the final champion. How did such a powerful Lu Jinyang become like this? Did Wuyue attack him? I frowned slightly. From my point of view, Wuyue only has the cultivation of a young god celestial master and has an Een soul body. It's possible that he's stronger than me, but it's unlikely that he's stronger than Lu Jinyang. With this in mind, I took a deep breath and calmed myself down. I raised my head and asked who was walking in front of me, "Senior, is the person on the ground dead or alive? Why is he here? Did he offend Senior?" Wuyue stopped in her tracks and turned to look at me. There was no surprise in her eyes. Clearly, she knew Lu Jinyang's identity very well. She nodded with a smile and said calmly, "He's not dead, but he's not far from death. As for the reason why the Taoist priest of Mount Dragon Tiger was able to discover my tracks was because he led me here. It's a pity that I've been hiding for 100 years and haven't been exposed. This person has unintentionally destroyed my 100 years of hard work. He naturally offended me." I was somewhat dumbfounded when I heard that. From what Wuyue said, Lu Jinyang's current state was really due to him. Lu Jinyang and Mount Dragon Tiger's enmity was due to the few Taoist priests he killed in the Feng Shui metaphysics shop. It's also related to me. After that, I heard that the people of Mount Dragon Tiger had been chasing after him. I never expected that those ox-noses would fail to punish him. In the end, they accidentally barged into this place and fell into Wuyue's hands. Fate really makes a fool out of people. It's no wonder there was no news of Lu Jinyang after I came to Zhuolu. I was originally puzzled, but now I have found the answer. Just as he was sighing, Wuyu continued, "Originally, even though he lured the people from Mount Longhu here, it was unintentional after all. It didn't cause any serious consequences. I didn't want to do anything to him. But later, I found out that the man had come for something in the mountain. He also told me that he knew the way to enter that place. I was overjoyed and brought him here. Who would have thought that here, he would reveal his true colors?" It turned out that he didn't know the way to open the door at all, and only said those words to use me. What Wuyue hates the most in his life is being deceived by others. That's why he used some tricks to imprison him here. This explanation allowed me to understand the details of what had happened. However, I quickly thought of something else and asked Wuyue, "Senior, you exposed my identity and know some other things. Did you learn all of it from this person?" Wuyue smiled brightly. "Of course. This person lost his mind under my zither music and spat out the truth. He said that he wanted to wait for the two of you to come before he could work together to open the door. When I heard him mention the door, I asked carefully. Only then did I know the exact identities of Mr. Zhou and Mr. Lin. I also knew that you were about to arrive here. Following that, I went outside to investigate and quickly found the two of you. So that's how it is." I couldn't help but smile bitterly in my heart. For the past 2 days, I've been guessing what relationship this Wuyue has with me. I never expected it to be like this. I really don't know whether to laugh or cry. I pointed at Lu Jinyang and continued asking, "The thing that Senior is talking about should be this person, right? To tell you the truth, this person and I are irreconcilable enemies. If Senior has nothing else to ask him, why don't you leave him to me to deal with?" I tried my best to speak calmly, but I was extremely nervous. My hatred for Lu Jinyang had always been an obsession of mine. Even though I killed Lu Ziang in the Yinshang royal tomb, the real person who killed my parents was Lu Jinyang. As long as he didn't die, the hatred in my heart wouldn't disappear. Ever since Lu Jianyang reappeared, his cultivation became higher and higher, far surpassing mine. I originally thought that I wouldn't have a chance to take revenge in a short period of time, but I never thought that Lu Jianyang would encounter such a calamity. I can only blame his bad luck. Wu Yu seemed to know that I would ask this question. After hearing what I said, he spread his hands and revealed a bitter smile. He naturally has no use to me. However, this person's cultivation isn't ordinary. After I confused his mind with the sound of the zither, I was worried that he would counterattack. So, I used the formation here to imprison him here. Although you can't see anything from the outside, once you touch his body, you will feel the power of the formation. This formation is extremely powerful. After being trapped inside, not to mention him, even the most powerful person wouldn't be able to escape. However, at the same time, the formation is the best defense. I can't take him away at all, nor can I attack him from the outside. I widened my eyes. There was such a thing? In order to verify Wu Yu's words, I bent down and pressed my hand on Lu Jianyang's body. As expected, there seemed to be an invisible barrier on Lu Jianyang's body. In an instant, the power that I sent over was bounced back. It didn't touch Lu Jianyang's body at all. I didn't believe it, so I opened my mouth and spat out the Xian Yuan sword. Because I had just used the power of the pregnant sword not long ago, it didn't have the power of the pregnant sword. However, the Xian Yuan sword's sharpness wasn't ordinary. I reached out to grab the Xian Yuan sword and fiercely stabbed it. Just like before, the Xian Yuan sword had obviously hit a barrier and couldn't move an inch forward. Next, no matter how much true essence I used, the invisible formation would reflect all of the power back at me. Just like what Wu Yue had said, I couldn't attack him from the outside at all. I couldn't even touch him. I put away the Xian Yuan sword and was silent for a long time. Then, I raised my head to look at Wu Yu and asked unwillingly, "Since you used the formation to imprison him, can't you remove the formation?" Wu Yu shook his head. "The formation is here. I only borrowed the power of the formation. I can't control the formation at all. However, Mr. Zhou, you don't have to do this. This formation can wear down a person's essence. If he's trapped inside, it won't be long before he loses all his essence and dies miserably. Mr. Zhou, you don't have to be so impatient." I sighed. What he said was right, but I hated Lu Jianyang. If I didn't take his life with my own hands, I still felt that I hadn't completely vented my hatred. After staying silent for a while, I finally accepted this fact. Then I let out a long sigh. All these years, the matter of avenging my parents had been the heaviest thing in my heart. Now, there was finally an outcome. It was a pity that I couldn't do it myself. While I was lost in my thoughts, the fatty beside me suddenly wailed and said, "Third baby, if he dies here, we won't be able to break the formation. Will my monster refining gourd disappear with him?" All this time, I had only been thinking about my hatred. Only after Fatty's words did I recall the monster refining gourd. I was immediately stunned. On this trip to Zhuolu, my other goal was the monster refining gourd. Furthermore, the monster refining gourd had been taken away by Lu Jianyang because of me. If I couldn't get it back, it would be too unfair to Fatty. I naturally didn't want such a thing to happen, but looking at the motionless Lu Jianyang on the ground and the disappointed Fatty, there was nothing I could do. Just as I was at a loss, Wu Yu suddenly extended his hand and handed something over. He continued smiling and said, "The monster refining gourd you mentioned should be this, right?" I focused my eyes and saw that Wu Yu was holding the monster refining gourd. I was immediately overjoyed. Before I could thank Wu Yu, Fatty was anxious and had already taken it. He kept fiddling with it in his hand, his face full of smiles. He had long thrown his depression aside. Seeing him happy, I heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly thanked Wu Yu. However, Wu Yu smiled faintly and waved her hand. "It's nothing. It's just that it belongs to its owner." She said it very calmly, but I felt that she was unfathomable. Chapter 702. Fatty's eyes still couldn't look straight at the divine artifact. After fiddling with it for a while, his eyes were filled with tears. He quickly put away the demon purification pot and thanked Wu Yu repeatedly. I had regained the demon purification pot. Seeing that Lu Jinyang was about to die, I heaved a sigh of relief. I finally felt that this trip to Zhuolu was worth it. However, the matter of the second volume of the Death Scripture was the focus of my trip. It was also something I had to obtain. I looked up ahead. There was still quite a distance ahead of us in the tunnel we were in. After this period of communication, I understood that this was Chiyo's skull tomb. It was also the west where Wu Yu's Tao companion, the Taoist of Mount Dragon Tiger, had disappeared 100 years ago. If I wanted to obtain the second volume of the Death Scripture, I naturally had to continue forward and enter Chiyo's tomb. However, I was somewhat unsure of Wu Yu's attitude. From the very beginning, she had been telling me to leave this place. She had promised to bring me something today to dispel the idea of entering Chiyo's tomb. But just now, when she told me about Lu Jinyang, she said that Lu Jinyang had lied to her, saying that he could open Chiyo's tomb, and that was why she had brought him here. From this sentence, Wu Yu seemed to want to open Chiyo's tomb again. The completely different attitude made me somewhat uncertain. After hesitating for a moment, I probed Wu Yu. Senior, the door you mentioned just now shouldn't be far ahead, right? Wu Yu had been smiling the entire time, but when she heard my words, she immediately retracted her smile and nodded silently. I still couldn't understand her attitude as I cautiously continued. Although I don't know why Lu Jinyang said that he would wait for the two of us to arrive before opening the door together. There's no harm in giving it a try, since he said so. Senior, please lead the way. Wu Yu stood there without moving. Her expression seemed to be struggling as she remained silent. After a full 5 minutes, just as I was beginning to think about what to do after Wu Yu rejected me, she suddenly moved. Without saying a word, she turned around and continued walking into the tunnel. I was immediately overjoyed and didn't dare to say anything else. I called Fatty and hurriedly followed her. Just like that, we followed Wu Yu for another 2 to 3 minutes. Suddenly, the view in front of us brightened. The narrow and dark tunnel turned into a huge cave when we took the last step. This cave was very big, but it was completely different from the previous caves that were full of murals. This one was more like a room with a round top and a square bottom. There were no murals on the walls, and instead, there were huge statues standing on the ground at regular intervals. These statues were made of bronze, and they all looked like humans. However, some had 8 arms and some had 9. They looked very strange, but without exception, every statue was exquisitely crafted. At first glance, they all seemed to be alive. After passing through the bronze statues, we came to the middle of the cave. Under Wu Yu's lead, we climbed a huge platform. Wu Yu stopped and turned around. The complicated expression on his face had disappeared, replaced by a faint smile. He said to me and the fatty, I heard from my Taoist priest that these statues are related to the method of breaking the door. I wonder if the two of you have found anything along the way? These bronze statues? Wu Yu's words sounded like he was testing us. I frowned slightly. Along the way, I had been paying attention to the surroundings. Of course, I had looked at the bronze statues carefully, but I didn't find anything strange. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I turned to look around with the fatty. The round platform was surrounded by bronze statues. They were like guards that surrounded the high platform under our feet. I did a rough count and found that there were exactly 81 bronze statues, no more, no less. While I was thinking about the number, the fatty spoke with certainty. These bronze statues should be a formation. Wu Yu's gaze turned to the fatty, and he said with a smile, Mr. Lin is right. This is indeed a formation. But I wonder if Mr. can tell what kind of formation this is? What's so difficult about it? The fatty was a person who liked to take advantage of the situation. Hearing Wu Yu's praise, his face became smug. He pointed at the surrounding statues and started explaining. He first pointed at the bronze statue in the southwest corner and explained, there are a total of 81 bronze statues here. Besides the high platform under our feet, they can be divided into 9 palaces formations. If I'm not wrong, this formation is called the 10 Ultimate Formation. It's an ancient formation passed down from ancient times. It's very powerful. Although I wasn't proficient in formations, I had some understanding of it from the records in the death scripture. The name Nine Palaces formation sounded extraordinary, but it was one of the most basic formations. When I had just started to study formations, I already had some understanding of the Nine Palaces formation. The Nine Palaces in the Nine Palaces formation were the Qian Palace, the Qin Palace, the Jin Palace, the Jin Palace, the Central Palace, the Sun Palace, the Li Palace, the Kuan Palace, and the Dui Palace. The formation represented the earth and was the foundation of formations. Although these bronze statues were of different shapes and sizes, after listening to Fatty's explanation, I could see that there was a Nine Palaces great array within these bronze statues. However, it seemed different from the Nine Palaces great array that I knew of. This was probably why the Fatty called it the 10-terminal formation. The Fatty was the expert when it came to formations. If I wanted to break the formation, it was up to him. I didn't speak, but the Fatty was full of confidence. He explained the specific details of the 10 ultimate formation in detail. Will you seem to be interested? After the Fatty finished, he asked hurriedly, since Mr. Lin knows this formation so well, it shouldn't be a problem for you to break it, right? The Fatty was in high spirits. He nodded without hesitation and said loudly, "What's so difficult about it? Although the 10 ultimate formation is an ancient formation that I have never come into contact with before, as the saying goes, understanding one method leads to understanding all methods. To put it bluntly, the Tao of formations is like a tall building rising from the ground. As long as you study it carefully, there will be a time when you can break it. Senior, don't be anxious. I'll break this formation right away." This guy probably still remembered we used kindness just now. After saying that, he immediately jumped off the stage with great effort, walked to the bronze colossuses, and studied them carefully. Since Wu Yu had mentioned the formation, it was obvious that it was related to opening the door to Chiyo's tomb. I sat down patiently and waited for the Fatty to break the formation. After studying it for a while, the Fatty seemed to have discovered something. He ran back and didn't say anything. He sat cross-legged on the round table and closed his eyes. He made a hand seal and circulated his true essence. When he opened his eyes again, the strange phenomenon of the sun and moon shining together appeared in his right eye. Using the sun-moon alien pupils, the Fatty started to observe the 10-terminal ancient formation again. As he observed, he explained to us, these Nine Palaces grand formations look like they're unrelated to each other, but they're actually connected. Pulling one of them will affect the whole formation. It's impossible to break the formation with brute force. The reason why the 10 ultimate ancient formation is called the 10 ultimate ancient formations is that no matter which direction you break the formation from, you will die. Moreover, I just looked at it. This 10 ultimate ancient formation is different from ordinary 10 ultimate ancient formations. Each of these bronze statues is a ferocious god. If they were placed elsewhere, it wouldn't be a problem to solve them one by one. However, in this formation, if someone tries to break the formation by force, these 81 ferocious gods will take turns to attack. They will use the formation's power to attack, and use the tactic of taking turns to kill the person who breaks the formation. As soon as the Fatty finished speaking, Wu Yue's eyes brightened. He nodded and said, "Mr. Lin is right. In the past 100 years, I have tried to break the formation countless times, but I have failed every time. I was almost seriously injured a few times." Wu Yue agreed with him. I observed the 10 ultimate ancient formation and found that these bronze statues were similar to the monsters I had seen in the painting in the cave. Legend had it that Chi Yu had 81 brothers. All of them had heads of bronze and 4 heads of iron, 8 arms, and 9 toes. They were extraordinary, which should be referring to these monsters. Thinking about this, I was even more certain that we were very close to Chiyo's tomb. Perhaps, after breaking this 10 ultimate ancient formation, it would be time for us to enter Chiyo's tomb. While I was thinking, the Fatty took action. He waved his right hand and threw 3 ancient coins into the air. The 3 ancient coins were round on the outside and square on the inside, as if they were carved from jade. As soon as they appeared, they glowed with white light. They looked very extraordinary. The 3 ancient coins fell from the air, but they didn't fall to the ground. Instead, they floated in front of the fatty and spun rapidly. As the fatty made a hand seal, the white light became stronger and weaker at times. As it flashed, it seemed to contain countless mysteries. Chapter 703. I had 100% confidence in this fatty's attainment and formations. A few years ago, when his cultivation base was still very low, he helped me seal the true dragon energy in the jade bracelet. A few days ago, he even repaired the mountain-protecting formation that had been passed down for thousands of years in Wangwu Grotto Heaven. Although the 10 absolute ancient formation in front of us is mysterious, Fatty is confident that he can break it. Although Wu Yue's previous attitude was a little strange, his eyes were fixed on Fatty at this moment. He looked very nervous, obviously hoping to break the formation. After the Fatty finished chanting the incantation, he clasped his hands together and pointed at the 3 ancient coins in front of him. Immediately after, the 3 ancient coins seemed to be frightened and turned into 3 sparkling streams of light, rushing toward the Tenju ancient formation in front of them. The ancient coins flew through the air like 3 jade dragons, circling the heads of the 81 bronze statues. They were also like sparrows returning late and looking for their nest in the forest. The ancient coins looked very agile, but this action seemed to consume a lot of Fatty's energy. In just a few breaths, Fatty was sweating profusely. It seemed that the formation in front of him was far from as easy as he said. Fatty took a deep breath and made a hand sign with his hands again. He shouted again, "Go!" Once again, under Fatty's command, the 3 ancient coins seemed to have finally recognized the direction and instantly dispersed, splitting into 3 different directions and falling in different directions. The first one flew to the east and landed on the center palace of the 9 palaces Great Array in the east. Sparkling light flowed and instantly activated the 9 palaces Great Array. The changes did not stop there. The other 2 ancient coins also found their own positions. They were the central palace of the 9 palaces formation in the southwest corner and the central palace of the 9 palaces formation in the northwest corner. With the addition of the 3 ancient coins, the bronze statues in the 9 palaces formation in the 3 positions suddenly seemed to come to life. They waved their arms and moved. After doing this, Fatty slowly opened his eyes with a proud look on his face. This so-called 10 absolute ancient formation had a total of 10 9 palaces formation. Fatty's 3 ancient coins only activated 3 of the 9 palaces formation. There were 6 remaining that did not move. But then, Fatty put his hands behind his back and waited. He had no intention of continuing to break the formation. I didn't understand, so I asked, "Do we only need to activate these 3 formations?" The Fatty nodded and explained to me, "The most important nodes of the 10 terminal formation are located in these 3 places. As long as the accumulated power in these 3 9 palaces formation is released, the entire 10 terminal formation will collapse on its own." As for the 3 ancient coins I used, they were the formation breaking stones unique to our Zhanshi Dao. There were only 9 of them in total, and I had to pester my master for a long time to get them. In the words of my master, with this array-breaking stone, breaking all the formations in the world is only a matter of time. All the arrays in the world could be broken. No matter how you looked at it, it sounded like he was bragging. However, although the Fatty was not very reliable, his master, Immortal Guan, had been in charge of the Tao of divination for many years. When it came to knowledge of arrays, he was probably second to none in the world. If these words were really said by Immortal Guan, that must be somewhat credible. After getting the Fatty's assurance, not only me, but even Wu Yue also relaxed. The 3 ancient coins hovered above the bronze statue's head and moved along with it. However, no matter how they moved, the distance between the 3 ancient coins remained the same. It looked quite mysterious. As time passed, I could clearly feel that the 3 locations of the 9 palace formation had slowed down. It should be that the method of breaking the formation was effective. Looking at the situation, I estimated that it wouldn't be long before the 3 locations of the 9 palace formations power would be completely released. At that time, the entire 10-terminal formation would be broken. Just as I was feeling excited, the 3 ancient coins suddenly jumped in the air. Not long after, they all flew back to the fatty. As the ancient coins flew away, the 10-terminal ancient formations operation came to an abrupt halt. It was as if an exquisite machine had suddenly been stuck. Seeing this, Wu Yue and I looked at each other, our eyes filled with excitement. The 10-terminal ancient formation should be broken, right? However, at the same time, the fatty's expression changed drastically. He reached out and put the 3 ancient coins into his pocket. Then, he said to Wu Yue and me with an embarrassed expression, "Third baby, be careful. This formation is strange. I couldn't break it successfully. I failed to break it." Just now, the fatty had spoken so confidently that I hadn't thought about what would happen if I failed to break the formation. However, after confirming that I had failed to break the formation, I immediately reacted. If we failed to break the formation through skill, it meant that our actions just now would be considered as breaking the formation by the 10-terminal ancient formation with brute force. According to what the fatty had said, as long as someone tried to break the formation with brute force, the 81 bronze statues in the 10-terminal ancient formation would be activated and use the formation's power to kill us. The fatty naturally knew this better than I did. After saying that, his face instantly turned pale. He threw out several jade tablets and directly activated the 9 yellow river formation, preparing to deal with the formation's counterattack. Wu Yue obviously understood this. Even before the fatty appeared, she had already assumed a fighting stance. She raised her hands in front of her chest and looked ahead vigilantly. I didn't know how powerful the 10-terminal ancient formation was, but according to my speculation, Wu Yue had used this formation to trap Lu Jianyang here. From this, it seemed that this formation wasn't ordinary. At least, it could erupt with power that surpassed the Yang God realm. No wonder the fatty and Wu Yue were so nervous. I thought for a moment, but I didn't have any idea. I hurriedly asked the fatty, "What should we do now?" The fatty's face could be described as ashen. He shook his head and said in despair, "What else can we do? Either we break the formation by force, or we get killed by the bronze statues." My heart sank. I turned to ask Wu Yue, "Senior, is there any other way?" Wu Yue also shook his head. "This formation is very powerful. I've tried it before. After the formation is activated, I can use a secret technique to escape, but I can't take care of you guys." His words made my heart sink. I turned to ask the fatty, "Where's your monster refining gourd? If it doesn't work, let's hide in the monster refining gourd first." There is a huge space in the monster refining gourd. As long as we temporarily hid in the monster refining gourd, no matter how powerful the formation was, it wouldn't be a threat to us. Unexpectedly, the fatty's face became even grimmer. He shook his head and said, "I've already tried. I don't know why, but the monster refining gourd can't be activated at all. I can't even feel the power of space from the sky measuring ruler. I can't use it all." What? The monster refining gourd can't be used? This is the formation that guards Chiyo's tomb. The monster refining gourd originally belonged to Chiyu. In this formation, the monster refining gourd's function is limited, but it's normal. I didn't expect that even the sky measuring ruler can't be used. The 2 life-saving methods that the fatty and I had relied on for this trip were all ineffective. What should we do now? While my mind was in a mess, I suddenly remembered that when I was in Chiyo's shoulder mound in Juri County, I had used the Jojo cauldron to open the gate of the ancient tomb. This place was also Chiyo's tomb. In a sense, the formation guarding this skull mound was also the gate of Chiyo's tomb. Could it be that we had made a mistake from the beginning? This formation didn't need to be broken, but needed a key to open the gate? While I was pondering, rumbling sounds resounded from all around us. Countless bronze statues had already surrounded us. Their thick arms were already swinging down. Every strike wasn't any weaker than the Yang God celestial masters. This was only the first bronze statue in the 9 palaces formation. When all the statues activated the power of the formation at the same time, we wouldn't be able to resist. I took a deep breath and made up my mind. I shouted at the fatty and Wu, "The two of you, hold on for a while. I've thought of a way to break the formation." The fatty and Wu Yue looked delighted. The fatty didn't say anything and just nodded. Wu Yue said to me, "I've tried before. I should be able to hold on for about 7 minutes. Mr. Zhou, if you have a way, please hurry up. After that, I can only use a secret technique to escape." As she spoke, the bronze statues charged over. The fatty's 9 bins yellow river formation was instantly activated. Yellow smoke rose and enveloped us. Wu Yue's figure had already charged out and disappeared into the yellow smoke, fighting with the bronze statues. I retracted my attention from the two of them. I took out the Jojo cauldron from Xiang Lu's leather pouch and looked around. If this place was the same as the shoulder mound, then the key to open the gate was the Jojo cauldron. Besides Lin Aching's Yinzhou cauldron, the other 8 cauldrons were in my hands. The key naturally wouldn't be a problem. However, with the key, I still had to find the keyhole. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.